C376. One shot. Morrigan, hang in there. I'm coming to save you. Ashlock couldn't believe what he was saying. Since when did he, a demonic spirit tree revered as an evil god, sprout such heroic lines? Why? Morrigan replied through abyssal whispers of her own, as it was the language of the void. She sounded calm, too calm for her situation. Cultivators were very good at putting up a facade, but there was surely a limit. The Morrigan he saw being crushed to death under immense gravity sounded the polar opposite of the one in his head. What do you mean why? Ashlock felt annoyed. Here he was, offering to save someone he would be pretty happy to let go, and they didn't even appreciate it. Elaine would be sad if you died and would definitely get mad at me for not doing everything within my power to help. I'm fine, though. Ashlock squinted at her crushed body with his spiritual sight and had to respectfully disagree. She was one step away from becoming nothing more than fleshy paste. They aren't even stopping me from leaving. Leaving? What was she talking about? She was trapped by Vincent. Did he have mind control powers to make her delirious? Yeah, the Nitro's cultivators watching over the central street are simply watching me go. It's kinda creepy how statue-like they are. Ashlock looked behind him, and sure enough, in the distance down the cracked and deserted central street, he saw a lone woman with black hair walking away. His vision blurred as he went to take a closer look just to confirm. Void chi flickered across her skin, forming a sheen, making her a dead spot in his spiritual sight, which is why he hadn't noticed her earlier. Morrigan, is that really you? The woman paused and looked at the sky. Yes, it's me. Why are you acting so strange? How did you get here? Quote. Void step. Morrigan tilted her head, confused at the question. The moment I noticed Diana's void shield suddenly break, I used void step to escape. Morrigan pointed at the entrance to the city they had entered through, and now I'm going to make my way out unless you need something from me. Though I don't know what you expect me to do against a peak nascent soul realm cultivator while reality suppresses me to the star core realm. Ashlock sighed with relief. You are free to leave. Actually, I would prefer if you flee this place as quickly as possible. I have no qualms with that. Morrigan shrugged and continued on her way. Ashlock returned to the Nitro's castle's courtyard in a totally different mood. Vincent was still there, putting on a show and torturing something resembling Morrigan, but Ashlock now knew it was nothing more than an imitation and wasn't buying it. Vincent hadn't captured Morrigan at all, making the rest of his claims hard to believe. Ashlock had already been skeptical of his nice guy act, but now he also doubted Vincent's claims that he could have forcefully captured everyone here if he wanted. I can't tell if he's powerful or not, Ashlock grumbled. Okay, I know he's powerful by sheer cultivation realm alone, but until now, he hasn't actually shown any of his true strength. He's keeping his cards so darn close to his chest it's insane. He's got me doubting everything. Now I don't even know if the Silverspire Third Elder died in such a gruesome way or if he was some sort of blood clone from the start like Demetrios Skyrant. It reminded Ashlock of those school plays he used to be forced to participate in, where they would use ketchup packs to substitute blood. It actually looked quite realistic under the dramatic lighting of the stage. So, the kids in the audience may believe it was real for a moment, but the adults who knew the trick couldn't see it as anything but ketchup and would struggle to suspend their suspension of disbelief. That is how Ashlock felt as he stared at the fake Morrigan being tortured. Vincent glared up at Hades and flexed his hand some more, making the fake Morrigan howl in agony again, reminding Ashlock that he had never heard the woman make such a noise. Even when he crushed her with his soul pressure, she had seemed unfazed and simply laughed it off. I really don't enjoy torturing a fellow cultivator like this, Vincent sighed dramatically, but if we can't reach an agreement, you leave me no choice. Ashlock had lost all motivation to save Morrigan. After all, that wasn't Morrigan inside that bubble of intense gravity. You know what? Vincent clearly believes targeting those around a cultivator is a good way to control them and get them to do what he wants. I wonder if the same would work against him. He hadn't reacted much to losing 2 guardians, but that could be an act. Maybe deep down, he was seething but knew better than to be rash. At what point would he snap? Ashlock was curious to find out. Larry. Yes, master. What can this humble servant do for you? Kill the Nitro's cultivators lining the central street for me. The spider-shaped cloud of silver ash closing in on the Nitro's castle shifted toward the central street. How many should I kill, master? All of them. Ashlock coldly answered. Vincent had the nerve to capture and pretend to torture one of his so he wouldn't hold back. He had already marked the Nitro's family for death due to their hunger for Stella's bloodline, and today had only further solidified his decision in stone. Rano VE section. All of them. There was a hint of childlike glee from the spider. Master, may I devour them whole? Ashlock paused. He hadn't finished devouring the two Nitro's guardians from earlier but didn't expect a massive amount of sacrificial credits as they were in the Star Core realm, 5 whole stages below him. Meanwhile, the Nitro's cultivators on the central street were weaker, with most being mid or low stage Star Core realms. So, for him, their corpses wouldn't be worth much. Especially because their ridiculous regeneration made turning them into ants more of a hassle than it was worth. Ashlock brought up the system's description of Larry. Herald of the Divine Ash. Larry S. Having consumed the flesh of a divine being from an upper realm, Larry has unlocked a new path to power. As a herald of the Divine Ash, he has begun his path to become a deity. Alongside unlimited cultivation potential, Larry has divine authority over ash and decay. He can decay any matter at will within his realm of influence. As a divine being with governance over an affinity, Larry's body has been reformed entirely from divine ash, allowing him to reincarnate from ash and gain immortality. Unlawfully taken from Royal Road, this story should be reported if seen on Amazon. He was perfect for the job. Larry's authority over decay countered the Nitro's cultivators, ultra-speed regeneration. If he was left to reduce these cultivators to ashes and absorb them into his body, his combat strength and cultivation would soar. As an S-rank summon, Larry was supposed to be at the strength of an early-stage nascent soul realm beast. But after a few Mystic Realm visits, he was nearing the threshold of evolving to S+ grade. This feast could tip him over the edge toward evolution and put him on the same level as Vincent Nitro's. As much as some more sacrificial credits would be appreciated, sometimes it was better to share. Yes, Larry, eat to your heart's content. Today, the Ashfallen sect will enjoy a grand feast on vile blood. Your wish is my command, Master. Larry's eyes glowed an ominous red as he loomed over the central street. The Nitro's cultivators that were quietly watching Morgan leave looked up at Larry with far more concern. The halo of ash orbiting Larry's crown of horns began to spin as nascent soul realm's soul pressure with a hint of divinity radiated down on the cultivators. Many collapsed to one knee, others spat blood. A few managed to remain standing, and they desperately drew weapons. Those who defy my master are destined for death, Larry declared in the ancient runic language. His silver ashen body shimmered with the majesty of a divine creature as he floated there high above his soon-to-be food before he crashed down upon the more incapacitated ones. As they were unable to even resist his soul pressure, they couldn't fight back as they found themselves in Larry's maw. They screamed as their blood affinity desperately tried to regenerate their bodies, only for it to cause them to decay faster. Within seconds, they melted into silvery ash that flowed into Larry's body, making him grow in size slightly. Larry didn't hang around. His body, like a swarm of bloodthirsty locusts, shifted in direction and headed toward the ones able to barely resist his soul pressure. Stop, vile beast. A Nitro's woman screamed as she raised her hands, and a net of blood hastily woven from her fingers flew out at Larry. For a brief moment, it looked like it worked as it wrapped around his form, only for the relief to be wiped from the woman's face as the blood net decayed to ash and simply added to Larry's power. Resistance is futile. Larry's maw opened wide and engulfed the woman. All shall decay to ash for my master. Blood poured out of the woman's eyes, nose, ears, and mouth as pressure exploded out from her. She had tried to go supernova as a last-ditch effort, but it was pointless. All it did was make it easier for Larry to devour her as she gave up on defense. Elders, on my command, we attack together. Buy time for the ancestor to help us. A Nitro's man who seemed important by his black robes embroidered with a golden lotus on the back bellowed out. Larry turned toward the voice. He looked sinister. His maw of silvery ash still dyed red from his half-finished meal. As the last remains of the woman decayed in his mouth, his body grew in size again. He was now half the size of the buildings the cultivators were standing on. The halo of ash orbiting his crown of horns thickened, as did his soul pressure. It began to spin as Larry floated through the air toward them, his ashen legs dragging across the street as he made his way to the other side. All of the remaining Nitro's cultivators that could put up any fight gathered around the leading elder. Blood spear array, he commanded, and blood poured from their fingers and solidified into spears that rose and gathered above them in a dense cluster. Blood also seemed to pour down from the dome surrounding the city, empowering the spears further. Attack! The man shouted, pointing at Larry. The tips of the blood spears tilted to aim at Larry before they all shot toward him at once. There was a whistling noise as they all impacted the floating spider a second later, turning him into a bloodied hedgehog. That hurt. Larry growled as he raised his head and glared at them with his many red eyes, but only a little bit. The blood spears impaling him rapidly decayed into silvery ash, and Larry ballooned in size as he absorbed it all. His body would now take up the entire street as he floated overhead. The Nitro's elders strained their necks to look up at the silvery cloud of death that loomed over them. Stop. With a single word, an immense pressure that even Ashlock could feel weighing down on his roots deep under the street gripped the area. Looking toward the voice, he saw that Vincent had seemingly teleported from the courtyard and was now standing effortlessly in the air above Larry. His hand was open like a claw and aimed at the spider cloud, seemingly holding Larry in place. What are you doing? Vincent seemed exasperated as he frowned. Ashlock finally felt in the mood to humor the man. Hades turned around and he addressed Vincent with abyssal whispers by using the ent as a proxy. Finally got bored of playing pretend and torturing a clone. Vincent slowly turned in the air and glared at Hades, so you finally decide to speak. I don't like to waste words speaking with deluded fools like yourself. If you want to play pretend, do so at the expense of your own time. Ashlock was still a little bitter about being fooled by Vincent's act. It had been a little too convincing. To the man's credit, he seemed unfazed by Ashlock's taunting. You are the leader of this Ashfallen sect, correct? Who knows? Ashlock replied. We are both using proxies, so who's to say that's even how you look? It's normal for high-level cultivators such as ourselves to use proxies. There are too many uncertainties in life to risk exposing ourselves out in the open. Vincent gestured to Larry. This is a perfect example. Summits are always a little chaotic, but this is on a different level. It's like you have a vendetta against me or something. Come on, let's talk about it. Slaughter like this doesn't benefit anyone. It's just a waste of chi. Ashlock almost wanted to laugh. For anyone else, that may be true. But for him, there was no better way to power level than a good slaughter. Vincent sure does seem obsessed with preserving chi. Ashlock mused, maybe he is close to reaching the monarch realm. Even if he could safely use his evil eye, Ashlock doubted he would learn Vincent's true cultivation level from gazing at a blood clone. Let me hear your proposal, Ashlock said with a deliberately dismissive tone. He had already shown his open aggressiveness and had no plans to stop. Nitro's city would be reduced to ash by sundown, so there was little Vincent could offer to make him stop. Other than Vincent actually forcing him away by showing off some of his power for once. We should work together. No. Why not? Vincent frowned. If the Ashfallen sect is truly a divine level sect on par with the Celestial Empire, as demonic sects finally have a chance. For too long, the Celestial Order has exercised its authority across the realm. If not for us having to constantly move to avoid the beast tides and rebuild, we could have a chance of matching them. As you said, the Ashfallen sect is divine level. What need would we have for you? Vincent's face twisted. I'm nearing the peak of the nascent soul realm. Ashlock laughed through Hades, yet you couldn't save a single one of your family. My family. I don't need them, Vincent sneered. None of their strength matches even a fraction of mine. Isn't that because you suppress them to be below you? Why? Scared they will surpass you? No, it's so I can do this. Vincent pointed his free hand at the remaining group of Nitro's elders on the rooftop. The one who had been leading them with the golden embroidered lotus on his back collapsed as streams of blood flowed out of his nose, eyes, and mouth toward Vincent. After a few moments, the Star Core Realm cultivator was reduced to a lifeless husk as he fell forward, slid down the roof, and crashed into a heap on the street below. Vincent then turned to Hades with blood gathered in a sphere above his palm. Am I supposed to be impressed or something? Ashlock asked. In truth, that was a terrifying power. His main advantage over other cultivators was his chi pool and how easy it was to replenish through killing. Yet it seemed Vincent had a similar capability, though more restricted. It was interesting how challenging the man's pride caused him to freely display such capabilities. This is what Ashlock wanted more than anything right now. Information on Vincent Nitro's capabilities so he could determine the best way to bring him down. They were like two chess grandmasters playing a death game with words through their proxies, and Ashlock was on the offensive. What can you even do with that gathered blood? It's only of the Star Core realm, is it not? It seems like a waste to me. Vincent pointed his hand at Hades. A million spikes shot out at once, annihilating Hades. There was nothing left of the ent as the blood fell to the ground, forming a river of blood that rushed down the street, painting the storefronts a gruesome scarlet. Need I demonstrate more? Vincent smirked as he pointed his finger at a cowering Nitro's woman who was barely in the Star Core realm and unable to move a muscle under the immense soul pressures of Vincent and Larry. Fuck no, what the hell was that? Ashlock shouted in his mind. Hades had been a 7th stage nascent soul realm ent, yet he was one shot with borrowed chi via a proxy. What if Vincent showed up at Red Vine Peak with a bunch of his family in tow and started shooting attacks like that off? Would his Voidstorm Aegis even react in time? I guess you possess the firepower to kill one of my weaker servants, Ashlock said as arrogantly as he could muster through Anubis as he felt his connection to Hades cut. How about you tell me more about this possible partnership? Meanwhile, Ashlock opened a portal deep within the Nitro's castle and had Chaos step through. As a peak star core realm ent with the Void affinity, she was the perfect choice to hunt for Vincent Nitro's true body. C-377. Threads of Fate. It looks like I successfully fooled him. Vincent hid a sigh of relief as he didn't have to do another demonstration and lowered his hand. While he had made it look impressive, a lot of work had gone into killing that nascent soul realm shadow titan, and it started way before he drained the blood from one of his elders. In fact, the draining of the elder was more for show than anything else. A classic misdirection to draw attention away from the truth. Since the moment this Ashfallen sect showed up and summoned those 2 nascent soul realm shadow monsters, I knew I had to take the opportunity to get rid of one of them. I'm just glad the illusion I conjured of Elder Morrigan Voidman being tortured managed to obscure my powering up of the grand blood gathering array below the city. Vincent's spiritual senses were spread across the city, and he had detected the presence of the strange silver cloud ages ago. Noting its divine nature and cultivation level, he allowed the vaguely spider-shaped cloud to devour some of his family members to gauge its strength and to see if it would be a better target for the grand array. I can't stop this one, Vincent concluded as he eyed the divine monster cautiously. The Shadow Titan had been an easy target due to its size, and as a Shadow Affinity monster out during the daytime, its defenses were considerably weaker for its cultivation level. Meanwhile, this spider seemed impossible to stop. All Vincent could do was burn his gravity chi to lock it in place for a while, but that wasn't a permanent solution. I have no idea who this Ashfallen sect is, but they are too dangerous to fight head-on for now. I need to reach Monarch Realm, and then nothing in this layer of creation can stop me, not even this divine spider. Vincent's eyes flickered to the horizon. All I need is to absorb the Crestfallen bloodline. With access to their ancestral knowledge, I can comprehend the laws of all 3 of my affinities, form my inner world, and become unstoppable. Devouring Stella Crestfallen's bloodline was all he cared about now. He had been unsure if she had awakened the truly ancient variant of her bloodline that gave her access to the knowledge of the Crestfallen family until he provoked her enough earlier while posing as Demetrios Skyrant. Once Stella declared her full name, the overwhelming presence of her bloodline had almost broken his blood clone apart. That was when he knew without a doubt that she possessed the absolute pinnacle of bloodlines. The one that rules over all others. Descendants of the Crestfallen family were already rare enough, but unless they awakened the ancient variant, their bloodline provided nothing but the ability to focus and learn quickly. While useful, it was nothing compared to the version Stella had. Vincent had tried to replace the demoness standing beside Stella with a clone to capture her, but while he had been setting his trap, Stella had unexpectedly turned and stabbed him. I still don't know how she noticed. Maybe the leader of the Ashfallen sect informed her with telepathy. Vincent squinted at the remaining nascent soul realm shadow ent, which the Ashfallen sect's leader was now using as a proxy. Right now, he would lose a fight to it as his capabilities were considerably reduced when fighting through a blood clone, and the array under the city would need days to recharge. Vincent cleared his throat and addressed the strange skeleton made from bamboo. First of all, we should forgive each other's transgressions. While I did destroy your Shadow Titan to prove a point, you killed many of my elders. It would be improper for us to start off an alliance with grudges. What do you say? He didn't believe for one second that the Shadow Titan had been a weaker servant. Even for a divine-level sect, anything in the nascent soul realm was a considerable asset. It hadn't acted like a sentient monster. Instead, it seemed like a created being similar to a golem some earth cultivators used to fight. Such a creation had likely been incredibly costly to make. More expensive than the entire Blood Lotus sect could afford. If not for the fact there was a second one, he could be convinced it was one of a kind. In comparison, the death of my family members is inconsequential. I cannot afford to enrage this Ashfallen sect for now. What I need is to buy time. While under their protection from the Celestial Order and the Beast Tides, I will find Stella Crestfallen, bathe in her blood, and ascend to heights unseen. For too long, he had been trying to advance all 3 of his affinities to the level of Monarch Realm, but the path before him without the help of the Crestfallen ancestral knowledge was looking slimmer with every passing year. Getting useful information on obtaining laws in an affinity was terribly difficult. All he could find was texts saying to contemplate heaven's whispers for centuries. But he didn't have centuries to spare anymore. Enemies, new and old, were breathing down his neck, and he wasn't getting any stronger. I can agree to that, 100 voices overlaid reverberated out of the shadowy skeleton. Vincent felt the words buzz against his mental defenses as if trying to worm their way in, but he resisted by weakening his link to the blood clone. There was no way he was letting anyone get a look inside his head. Great. I'll release the spider. Vincent didn't want to admit it, but the spider had devoured his gravity chi, and he was moments away from losing his grip on it. His elders, who were still cowering on the rooftop, yelped as the ashen spider lurched forward and engulfed them. Vincent raised a brow as the silver cloud expanded in size and dispersed to reveal an empty rooftop beside blood stains on the tiles. Do we not have an alliance? I simply agreed to forgive past transgressions. The skeleton laughed. Besides, I promised my divine pet a feast. Wouldn't it be unfair to deny him such a delicious meal? Don't you agree? Vincent ground his blood clone's fake teeth. He had never experienced such humiliation in all his life. How arrogant could this Ashfallen sect be to refer to his family members as a delicious meal and devour them when he is standing right here? Once I reach Monarch Realm, I'm going to find this bastard and skin him alive right after slaughtering 9 generations of his bloodline. That would be quite unfair, Vincent agreed with a strained smile. Now that your pet has had his fill, what do you think about halting the bloodshed? The skeleton tilted its head. You have yet to offer a proposal that benefits me. I admit you are strong, but I have strength rivaling the celestial empire under my command. The ashen spider rose up and began to encircle Vincent. Its red eyes glowed with intense bloodlust, and he could feel the monster's soul pressure weighing down on him. This was the first time in centuries that Vincent had felt this threatened. Where in the 9 realms of hell had this Ashfallen sect come from? Stolen from its rightful place, this narrative is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. Did they descend from a higher realm? Are they a disgruntled fragment of the Frozen Star sect that stumbled upon some powerful legacy in a rift? None of this makes any sense. Perhaps if you were to tell me your affinities or the capabilities of your bloodlines, I could see if you would fit into my sect. What a joke. I'm nearing the Monarch realm. There's no way I can't fit into his sect. Just what is his objective here? Maybe I'll give him a small taste and see if he bites. I have gravity, blood, and shadow. Vincent lied. He would rather die than reveal his actual affinities. Illusion affinity only worked when others were unaware he possessed it. He could create anything and make it look realistic by combining gravity, blood, and illusion affinity. For example, his blood clones were made from blood. He then used illusion affinity to fake their appearance and voice, while his gravity affinity gave the clone weight and the presence of a genuine cultivator. The same could be applied to techniques. Vincent raised his hand and skillfully weaved his 3 affinities together. First, he created a tendril out of blood. He then wrapped it with his illusion affinity to make it appear like a tendril of shadow chi. The final touch was a little gravity chi to make the attack hit harder than it should. Aiming down, he shot the tendrils at a nearby building, obliterating it. Interesting, the shadow skeleton said. To think you possess shadow affinity. What a good combination. It looks like I fooled him again. The leader of the Ashfallen sect seemed clueless, which he wasn't surprised by. His illusion affinity was nearing the Monarch realm, so unless someone's cultivation was on par with his or they were aware of his affinities' existence, they were unlikely to see through his lies. This raised some questions. Vincent deliberately did that demonstration to gauge the Ashfallen sect leader's cultivation level and, from his response, could conclude that the Ashfallen sect leader could not use his full range of senses through his proxy or wasn't really in the Monarch realm. Both options were good. Vincent just needed to keep the Ashfallen sect leader at arm's length, and he shouldn't pose too much of a threat. Now, tell me about your bloodlines. Vincent frowned. How about you reveal a bit about yourself or the Ashfallen sect? This is feeling quite one-sided. That's because it is. The skeleton gestured to the floating spider still circling him, hunger in its eyes. You answer my questions or become his food. Simple as that. Vincent snorted. This is a mere clone. You can't threaten me with death. I have no use for a disobedient servant. Prove your value to me, or I will hunt you down until the end of the realm. Vincent narrowed his eyes. I'm starting to think you have no interest in an alliance at all. Correct, the skeleton said as shadow chi gathered around its fingers. You are worthless in my eyes. Worthless. Vincent had never heard such nonsense. Why waste my time coming here and humoring my offer of an alliance? If you want to fight, Let's not waste any more of my precious time and get down to it. Vincent hated the idea of losing this clone, as it was costly to make. He had to use a considerable amount of chi from all three of his affinities, alongside a few buckets of blood from his family members, many of whom had perished today at the hands of this new regional power, the Ashfallen sect. But if the death of this clone was inevitable, he might as well use it to test his enemy's combat capabilities. He turned to the spider and conjured more fake shadow tendrils. Draining all the chi left inside the blood clone, he unleashed an onslaught of blood tendrils disguised as shadows upon the spider. To his surprise, the spider actually struggled to maintain its size as his tendrils knocked out a large chunk of it. Why didn't it grow in size like it had when devouring the blood techniques from my elders? Vincent wondered. He had actually damaged it. If he had more chi to work with, maybe he could even kill it. Was it because I layered my affinities, and it couldn't decay my attacks fast enough? Vincent's mind wandered as the spider recovered its general shape and charged at him. He didn't even have the strength left in the blood clone to raise his hand, and he experienced being decayed alive. His world went dark as his connection to the blood clone was cut. I really need to get a hold of the Echoheart bloodline again, Vincent groaned as he sat up from his bloody coffin and felt his consciousness spread through this new clone. Tisk, I can feel my control over my blood clones weakening with each one that gets destroyed by the Ashfallen sect. Not only were the bloodlines he absorbed inferior versions, but they also weakened over time like an unused muscle if he didn't keep absorbing the bloodline. This is why he founded the Blood Lotus sect, the largest bloodline farm on the 9th layer of creation. But it's all falling apart. Vincent climbed out of the coffin with a deep frown. I seem to have lost control of too many families while focusing on advancing my cultivation as much as possible before wasting months relocating. Vincent looked at the ceiling and pulled on his recently acquired Starweaver bloodline. Using it took a lot out of him and corrupted the bloodline quickly. I estimate I can call upon the threads of fate only 3 more times before I need to bathe in the blood of a Starweaver again. Who was next on my list? Celeste. Right. His eyes glowed gold, and the bare stone ceiling was replaced with a sea of stars. Hints at innumerable futures flowed into his mind as he was strung along the threads of fate. He wasn't sure how clear or coherent these futures were to those with the ancient bloodline, but his inferior version proved quite useful. Let's see. Tell me, threads of fate, where should I go from here? Every thread of fate he followed seemed to lead to the same result. Over and over, every thread was cut short, meaning he died. He didn't know how exactly he died, just that almost every choice he could make from here ended in his demise. The only decision that seemed to give him a glimmer of hope was running for the hills as fast as he could to the Celestial Empire. What if I managed to absorb Stella Crestallin's bloodline? Oh. Vincent winced as he went down that thread. It was by far the longest, as he lived long enough to reach the peak of power. But it resulted in far more than his death. While the other threads of fate would keep going despite the lack of his presence in them, this one was different. He got a vision that the divine being that would devour him would go on to destroy the 9 realms as well. The collapse of the 9 realms. What does that have to do with Stella? Vincent was perplexed. These visions didn't make sense. Before today, he had used this power, and his future had seemed more optimistic. All that had changed was the arrival of the Ashfallen sect, and now he was doomed to die. What about right now? He latched onto the shortest thread and was surprised to get a vivid vision of him dying in the corridor to a vague darkness. Dismissing the bloodline, his eyes returned to normal, and he supported himself on the coffin's edge as his head pounded. If he was to believe the threads of fate, he was destined to die. Nonsense. I'm a man-made god. Vincent straightened his back and got control of himself. Let's see if these threads of fate tell the truth. If I open this door, I should die. Opening the door slowly, he couldn't feel the presence of anything with his spiritual senses. Maybe the inferior version isn't totally accurate. Vincent mused as he stepped into the corridor. Perhaps they are possible timelines rather than guarantees. Vincent coughed blood. Confused, he slowly looked down and saw 4 claws wreathed in void chi impaling his chest. Looking over his shoulder, he saw a headless abomination. It ripped out its arms and swiftly tore him apart a second later, once again cutting his connection to another blood clone. As his world went dark once again, all he could think of was the Ashfallen sect's leader declaring that he would be hunted to the end of the realm. If all paths lead to death, then he would pick the one that gave him the longest chance at life. To hell with the 9 realms. He would get his hands on the crestfallen bloodline if it was the last thing he did. C378. Masterful Deception. Vincent pressed his back against the stone wall as he carefully peered through a runically enhanced window. Down below in the Nitro's castle's courtyard lined by statues of him in his prime, he saw the few remaining Grand Elders of the Blood Lotus sect who had stood on his side cowering before the nascent Soul Realm Shadow Lich. He couldn't hear what the Lich was saying to the Grand Elders as he was refraining from spreading his spiritual sense beyond the castle and possibly giving away his location. It looks like it's finally time, Vincent said in a deep, raspy voice that surprised even himself. It had been a while since his consciousness occupied his real body, and he had forgotten how far it had deteriorated. He stepped away from the wall, and his long toenails scraped on the stone as he trudged into the depths of the dark room. His long arms reached for the shelves as he gathered body parts floating in large jars of murky brown liquid. While he could create clones from blood and have them appear genuine to weaker cultivators with a clever application of illusion and gravity chi, they were nothing but disposable puppets that could command a fraction of his power. He had to carefully make a body from scratch if he wanted to create one capable of housing his many bloodlines and affinities. Hopefully, the eyes won't spoil before I can set up a new preservation array, Vincent grumbled as he took the jar containing his new eyes off the array built into the shelves. While spatial rings slowed down decay, they couldn't stop it entirely. Wah! Vincent suddenly kneeled over and retched while desperately gripping the shelf to stabilize his shaking body. Wiping his mouth, he inspected the back of his hand with a frown. Black blood. That's new. Pushing himself up to his trembling knees, he tried to calm his broken body down. The killing of my clones had a more significant toll than I thought, Vincent grimaced as he looked within. His soul was an absolute mess. 3 affinities competed for dominance, and since he had used much more blood and gravity chi recently, he was unstable. Add some soul damage on top of that, and he seemed on the brink of going supernova. This isn't good. I had hoped to strike an alliance with the Ashfallen sect to buy some time to switch bodies, but those bastards seem hellbent on destroying everything I have built up and killing me, but for what purpose? Vincent stabilized himself on the shelf as he thought through his long list of enemies and drew up the most likely. Now that I think about it, there's no way for a divine level sect to appear out of nowhere. This must be a division or lapdog for the Celestial Empire. Maybe the chairman finally decided to free himself from the council by establishing a shadow empire in the wilderness. If that's the case, it would explain why the threads of fate with my highest survival rate would be if I headed to the Celestial Empire. The chairman would rather let me live and recover than expose his secret branch to the Celestial Empire to hunt me down. Vincent had a long history with the chairman. They were like 2 old friends, just on the opposite side of a fence and with a dagger ready to slit the other's throat. Of course, there is no guarantee that the chairman has anything to do with the Ashfallen sect. They could also be a group that found a way down from the 8th layer of creation. Vincent sighed. What he needed was more information. He was utterly in the dark. Let's see. I've already decided I need to get a hold of Stella Crestfallen's bloodline. If I let her live and I escaped from here to the Celestial Empire, all I would achieve is living for a few centuries, but I would never be able to step into the monarch realm without the assistance of her ancestral knowledge of laws. I'm sick and tired of sitting in silence and listening to heaven's whispers for years on end with no results. With that course of action decided, Vincent looked toward the east. He had failed to capture Stella Crestfallen earlier due to her spatial anchor and because she somehow noticed that he had replaced the demoness beside her with a clone. But all hope was not lost. He could smell her bloodline from here. Taking a deep sniff and contemplating for a moment, he slowly opened his eyes and smiled. Darklight City. She is hiding near there, without a doubt. Trudging back to the window, Vincent eyed the Grand Elders in the courtyard below. It seemed the situation had deteriorated. Moving the sect is not feasible without the protection of other families and their help in building arrays. The new area will be monster infested, and another demonic sect may try to claim it. A fight is inevitable, which will consume a lot of chi and set me back decades. I'll go after Stella Crestfallen in Darklight City and flee elsewhere once the beast tide reaches its zenith. Now, who is in control of Darklight City again? His eyes flickered between the group below, and a slow realization set in. It was the Ravenborn family, but they were killed by the Winterwrath and Evergreen families under my orders. However, both of those families were then killed, and then the Redclaw family took over. That shouldn't have been possible unless the Redclaws got help from someone else. Vincent ground his teeth as he remembered the Redclaws had shown up alongside the Ashfallen sect. They must be working together to take me down. I'll have to approach Darklight City cautiously, as it's likely the stronghold for the Ashfallen sect. Vincent suddenly felt a cold grasp caress his soul as pressure washed over him. His gaze snapped in the direction it was coming from, and he locked his eyes with the shadow lich down in the courtyard. It was staring right at him. How did he notice me? Vincent scowled as he raised his hand and saw the viscous black blood still webbed between his sickly white fingers. All that had changed between now and the last time he was at the window was the presence of this blood. Analyzing it a little closer, Vincent sensed the faintest hint of divinity from the black blood. As this blood from the all-seeing eye, Vincent aggressively shook his hand as he stepped away from the window. That had been the name of the god Stella claimed to be a priestess of, and her daggers had been coated in this black blood. It must contain some tracking qualities. But why now? Because it was exposed to the air. Get off me. The building suddenly shook, and the runic enchantments on the window glowed fiercely with silver light as the defensive formation fought back against a cluster of shadow tendrils. Vincent wiped the black blood on a random cloth before throwing it away. I need to leave. Now. He quickly spread out his spiritual senses as his location was already compromised. As expected, he could feel strong cultivators and monstrous beings, likely belonging to the Ashfallen sect, rushing toward his position through the castle. If not for the defensive formations slowing them down, they would already be upon him. A case of literary theft. This tale is not rightfully on Amazon. If you see it, report the violation. Rather than wasting his chi fighting his way out and risking his body falling apart, Vincent exited the room and made his way to another. Inserting his hands into two holes atop a podium, he fed a grand array under the city his overflowing illusion chi that was throwing his soul out of balance. The Nitro's elders had thought him mad when he melted down their vast fortune of spirit stones to build multiple grand arrays under Nitro's city. He had done the same thing with every city he moved to, and never once had the arrays been activated. Some doubted they even worked and begged him not to spend so much time and spirit stones recreating the arrays in each new location. But one could never be too careful. Money didn't follow one to the afterlife, and the one time he needed them, they were here for him. Let's cover my escape with a few illusions, shall we? First, he had the city blanketed in a thick illusionary blood fog that seemingly appeared from nowhere. It was always easier to trick the mind when as many senses as possible were impaired, especially sight. Next, he had the fog seemingly drain the blood out of millions of mortals and gather it toward the Nitro's castle. He wanted it to look like the castle was gathering power and would explode. Now for the cherry on top, Vincent grinned as he manipulated the illusionary blood fog to wrap around anyone inside it to give them blood masks and matching soul pressure. This way, everyone in Nightshade City almost looked and felt the same in a cultivator's spiritual sight. Including the Shadow Lich, his still-alive family members, and the cowering Grand Elders of the Blood Lotus sect. Now I just have to sneak out through the chaos. Pulling in his soul's presence as much as possible, Vincent wreathed himself in illusion and gravity chi to turn himself virtually invisible by bending light around himself before he left the array room. He then skillfully avoided his pursuers, who were still blasting through defensive arrays to his secret room, by using hidden tunnels between the walls that were only traversable by manipulating gravity to bend the space. Making his way out into the street through an escape tunnel he had built himself and hidden behind illusion formations, he took a satisfied breath of fresh air. Ominous bells rang throughout the city, and the screams of mortals scrambling around through the fog, who all looked as if they were drowning from blood masks attached to their faces, were music to his ears. Vincent grinned as he effortlessly floated into the sky without a sword, one of the capabilities after reaching the nascent soul realm, and while still hidden by bending light around him, he shot off toward the east, leaving Nitro's city to fend for itself. I'll head to Darklight City first and call on Valandor. There's something he has that's mine. Ashlock couldn't believe he had missed an area of the castle. It now seemed obvious from the outside, but it must have been the work of these defensive arrays that kept his roots from getting near it. Silver light flashed across the exterior and window of the room like a force field. Come on, Anubis. Put some more power into those attacks. While talking nicely to the Grand Elders from the other families, he'd sensed his cursed blood from an upper floor of the castle and locked eyes with someone who looked like Vincent. Obviously, it could just be another clone, but anything was a potential lead, especially since his cursed blood led to the discovery. He had expected Anubis's shadow tendrils to smash right through the castle's stone so he could get a better look at the person inside, yet that had not been the case. This was one of the most impressive defensive formations he had ever seen. Just how paranoid was that freak? The amount of time and spirit stones that must have been poured into this castle could have founded a nation, and they were just going to leave it for the beast tide to destroy. He even unleashed barrages of spatial blades infused with dows upon the castle, but his attack strength was weak as he wasn't fighting through Progeny Dominion S. Still, this was ridiculous. The stone around that one room could be blasted through, but the room itself seemed impenetrable. Ashlock's vision blurred as he once again searched the vast castle with its thousands of rooms and corridors. He had his ethereal roots already burrowing through the defensive formations around the room as fast as they could. Meanwhile, the Void Reapers of Ashfallen, led by Chaos, were using their void-coated claws to slash away at a door that had appeared as nothing but another wall before. It had only been a minute since Ashlock sensed his cursed blood and feared the man had already somehow escaped. His fears turned out to be true when his ethereal root broke through the wall, and his spiritual sense flooded the room. The place was empty. There was no sign of Vincent, clone or not. Honing in on black blood-stained cloth discarded on the floor, Ashlock picked it up with telekinesis and confirmed that it was his blood sap. Spread out. Find Vincent Nitros at all costs, Ashlock said to the Void Reapers, and they vanished in absolute silence as they used Void Step to move elsewhere. He debated bringing in the rest of the sect to search for a moment but then dismissed the idea. They would need to eat Void Protection fruits and get their spatial anchors done again, all for the possibility of getting sent back to Red Vine Peak without seeing him. Gravity Chi could travel silently, and with Vincent claiming to have shadow Chi, he would be a nightmare to catch. Nox had been enough of a headache. Searching a few more corridors and finding nothing but terrified maids hiding out in random bedrooms, he gave up and looked outside the castle to a sight he wasn't expecting to see. The city was shrouded in a thick, blood-red fog that swirled aggressively through the streets. Gongs from distant bells rang out, and he could hear everyone screaming. Larry, what the hell is going on? He asked his guardian who he had left in the street to keep the Nitro's elders suppressed. Chaos Master, Larry said as he floated above the fog, it happened so suddenly throughout the entire city. The fog appeared, and then there were screams. Ashlock tried to look closer, but the fog was like taking the lid off a boiling pan and getting a face full of steam to his spiritual senses. It was utterly impossible to penetrate. Surging chi through his roots, he used telekinesis to push the fog aside, revealing a few mortals. There were strange blood masks on their faces that they were trying to yank off one another, and it seemed as if thin streams of blood were being siphoned from their bodies and gathering toward the castle. Oh shit, Ashlock saw the gathered blood condensing around the castle and begin pulsing like a heartbeat. Faster and faster, it pulsed, all the while glowing with power. It was almost as if it were a soul about to go supernova. Did that bastard set the castle and maybe the whole city to explode? It was a hell of a way to cover an escape, that was for sure. Ashlock's mind began to race. He could hear the mortals crying out for help through the blood fog. Millions would die, a capital city gone if he didn't do something. Morals and doing the right thing aside, this was an opportunity to get a lot of new worshippers, and fast. The problem was that he would need to open a portal to Red Vine Peak to use his evil eye and search for a solution to save everyone. After all, there was no use for worshippers that were dead. Ashlock quickly confirmed his Voidstorm Aegis was active back on Red Vine Peak and found his sect members in Quill's library. Stella, take everyone and hide in my inner world for now. Tree, what is happening over there? Sorry. No time to explain. Just trust me, okay. Ashlock switched back to Nitro's city while feeling sorry for leaving his daughter in the dark. Gathering as much spatial chi as he could muster, he opened a truly titanic rift in the sky. While one of this size was not needed, it helped add grandeur to his performance. Opening his evil eye, he stared through and could finally see Chi's flow, types, and cultivation level. Let's see how I can stop this from happening. Ashlock trailed off as he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Chi was high level, nearing the monarch realm. It was pure, and one of the most impressive displays of Chi he had ever seen. But none of it was real. It was all an illusion. The blood, the fog, the masks, everything. Vincent hadn't been the fool. Ashlock had been played from the start. He wanted to be angry at being fooled, but how could he be? While Vincent had escaped, the bastard had set the stage for the all-seeing eye to save millions from nothing but an illusion. C-379. Twisted Kindness. In the darkest depths of the Duskwalker residence, Elysia Mistshroud was sitting cross-legged in a viscous pool of blood before a tiny red-leafed sapling growing out of a stone altar. A purple-tinted aura wreathed her body, making her appear ghostly to her family members kneeling in rows behind her, their reverence focused on the tiny tree. Stella Crestfallen, the Grand Priestess of the All-Seeing Eye, had gifted Elysia a fruit that contained a divine seed of their god when Elysia had begged for a holy object to be the subject of her worship. Planting the seed, a small demonic sapling had sprouted. Since its birth, the whole Mistshroud family had carefully tended the tree, and Elysia had ensured it understood the greatness of the all-seeing eye through dreams via mystic chi. Mytherian, Elysia said as she caressed the tree gently like a mother with her mystic chi, do you understand yet the greatness of your father? The tree did not answer, but Elysia could tell it did not yet understand, for if it truly did, it would join them in prayer and sing praises to the high heavens. Perhaps you need more blood. A child needs to eat. Elysia pricked her finger with the tip of a ceremonial dagger and dripped blood over the tree's leaves. The droplets of blood rolled off its small leaves and trickled down its rock altar into the pool of blood Elysia was bathing in below. A few of the demonic sapling's roots had burrowed through the altar and extended into this blood pool, so Elysia used it as a place to leave corpses, her own blood, and some mystic chi. It was important that this child of her god was well fed and taken care of. Elysia let her chi pour into the pool as she lounged back and lazily opened her mind to the demonic sapling to show it the wonders of the all-seeing eye. Her long silver-tinted black hair that ran down her back was sprawled out floating in the blood pool and got dirtied by the bits of half-decayed animals floating around, but she didn't care. Little Mytherian, when you grow up, you will finally understand that there's far more to the all-seeing eye than anyone thinks possible. I've seen it. Her voice dropped to a whisper, he is not from this world. I need to raise you in case. Her eyes suddenly widened as she felt a domineering presence overwhelm her consciousness. Instead of resisting or even protecting herself, she let it flow in and dominate every part of her body and soul. Elysia Mistshroud, as the vice cult leader, I require your assistance with something. Anything. Elysia screamed in ecstasy as her god's words thundered in her mind like a chorus of the dead, and her body trembled, my body and soul are yours to command. Just tell me what your heavenly gaze desires. Her god sounded uncomfortable. Perhaps she hadn't shown her devotion enough. I apologize for my lack of manners. She glanced around desperately and laid eyes on the altar, which gave her the perfect idea. I'll show my devotion by opening my mind to you more. She stood quickly. Blood and bits of animal from the pool trailed down her body as she gripped the altar before her and, without hesitation, slammed her forehead on the sharpest corner. Along with the crunch of her skull, pain shot through her body, causing her to collapse backward. Her vision was blurred slightly as she squinted up at the demonic sapling on the altar she had been taking care of, and to her bewilderment, she could see the illusion of her god overlaying it. Elysia, what are you doing? The Grand Elder of her family had gotten up from his kneeled position and walked beside her with a look of concern. Father, be quiet. I'm receiving a divine message from the all-seeing eye. Elysia scowled at the blurred man as blood trickled down her face and into the pool below. Do not interrupt me. The Grand Elder seemed shocked as he knelt and bowed his head. I apologize. What does our God desire from my humble family? Elysia reached out to the presence in her mind. Speak through me. Whatever your desire is, have it be known to your humble servants. Very well. Her god sighed. He seemed tired. Yet the sudden presence that took hold of her was anything but. Elysia felt her body turn to face her still kneeling family. Her mouth opened. Yet what came out was not her usual voice but 100 voices at once. Vincent Nitros, leader of the Blood Lotus sect, desires something that is mine. Something so close to me that losing it would cause me to war with the 9 realms until its destruction are my own. Elysia watched as her family slowly stood up in unison. Mystic chi flickered across their skin, pulsing red with rage. The all-seeing eye had opened their minds to a new height of power. They owed their everything to him. Vincent Nitros has been marked for death by me for this transgression, as has the Nitros family. By sundown, the Nitros family will be no more, and Nitro City will fall under my domain. However, while running away, Vincent Nitros activated a grand array and set the city to explode, threatening to kill everyone. People who are unaware of my greatness. New potential worshippers. Elysia felt her body tremble. Such an outcome was inconceivable. Not only did this bastard cause trouble for her god by desiring something that was his, but he even dared to deny people from learning about the all-seeing eye's greatness before their demise. Inconceivable. What a tragic fate to perish before learning of the all-seeing eye. Without him, their souls will wander in the afterlife without knowing of his love. We need to save them. The Grand Elder said seriously. Agreed. I will teleport you all over to Nitro City. Save the city and its people with everything you have, all while spreading my name. That is my decree. Elysia fell to the pool like a puppet cut from its strings as the all-seeing eye withdrew his intense presence from her body. Her chi exploded out, sending waves through the pool. Her mind was left even more broken, her soul fractured and drifting. Yet she felt her strength reach a new height. Her cultivation had actually gone up to the 7th stage of the Star Core realm. It seemed the experience of becoming her god's voice had enlightened her. A face-splitting grin spread across her face as she stepped out of the pool, drenched in blood. Mistress Elysia, please clean yourself and get dressed. A nearby maid hesitantly handed her cult cloak, which she grabbed and absent-mindedly put on. Her thoughts were elsewhere. My cultivation increasing means the heavens recognize and have rewarded my devotion to the all-seeing eye. I must show even more vigor and worship next time. Elysia balled her fists before she decided to address her family again. This time with her own voice. She was enraged. What the all-seeing eye had told her made her blood boil. The all-seeing eye has blessed us with his divine words. We will hunt and kill Vincent Nitros till our last breath. We will wipe out all 9 generations of his bloodline and feast on their corpses. Elysia spread out her arms as she looked to the ceiling and shouted, but first, we will spread the name of our God. She licked her lips as blood continued to trickle down her face from the wound on her head. This is a decree, and it's our job as his faithful servants to carry out his will. All hail the all-seeing eye. May his gaze be forever eternal. The Grand Elder's voice boomed through the room, and the dozen other members of the Mistshroud family echoed the words with equal vigor. Elysia turned and caressed the leaves of the demonic sapling one last time. Mytherian, do you feel our love and devotion to your father? Can you feel his greatness flow through you? His profound words and teachings? Once again, the tree didn't reply, but the tree's father sure did. Enjoying the story? Show your support by reading it on the official site. Spatial chi, along with the all-seeing eye's presence, flooded the room, and reality was torn asunder as a rift manifested. Elysia narrowed her eyes at the rift that had appeared before her. So this is a gateway to the land my God desires dominion over. Whether it be hell, heaven, or somewhere in between, I will go where he wishes and conquer it all the same. Withdrawing and stepping on a sword, she flew through the portal with mystic chi wreathing her form and ready to manifest whatever she could imagine. As her ears popped from the pressure change, the intense smell of iron assaulted her nose alongside the sound of a gong and screams. She seemed to have been directed to the center of a city so large she could hardly make out the towering black walls in the distance. Below her was the courtyard of a comically large castle built on a mountain that lorded over the city. How could someone even live in a castle like this? It has to have thousands of rooms. Walking from one end to the other must take at least an hour. The castle's size made what Elysia was seeing even more unbelievable. The entire structure was covered in a layer of thick blood that pulsed as if it were a heart. The power radiating off it was immense, and it looked like it would explode at any moment as chi leaked out of random holes. So this is the power of someone that can anger a god, my god. Yet despite the imminent danger, the all-seeing eye simply watched through a massive rift in the sky. He did not show signs of intending to act, which contradicted what he had told her at the Duskwalker residence. Elysia realized the hidden meaning. If the all-seeing eye has entrusted me to deal with this, that means it's not worth his involvement. Elysia raised her hand above her head, and her mystic chi began to condense. Which has to mean that he trusts me enough to deal with it myself. Ah, I can feel his love. Mystic chi worked off belief from both the wielder and the opponent. As a higher form of illusion chi, she could bring things into reality so long as she could visualize them. If she believed strongly enough, almost anything was possible. I must liberate the city of this blood fog first so they can see the castle and the all-seeing eye in the sky. Otherwise, how else will the mortals experience his gaze invading their body and soul, bringing them to new heights? Elysia raised her other arm and showed both palms to the sky. Her broken soul hummed in her chest as she began to feed a small ritual circle between her fingers with power. It spun upwards and grew bigger and bigger. Her eyes glowed with a violet hue as the ritual circle expanded, covering the entire city and grinding away at the blood-red dome. It also began to suck up the bloody fog that was blanketing the city. As it absorbed more of this strange blood mist, the ritual circle actually grew in power rather than weakening. Elysia was in awe. The all-seeing eye must have foreseen this and given me a blessing. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for this technique to grow in power. That only happened when it encountered illusions, but her god wouldn't send her in to save the people from something that wasn't real. This city needed saving, and she was here to do it in the name of the all-seeing eye, even if it resulted in her soul's death from using up all her chi. Mistshroud family. Believe in the all-seeing eye, and he shall grant you a blessing. Your powers will grow tenfold as we rid the world of this filth that threatens to deprive millions of feeling the warmth of his eternal gaze. Praise the eternal gaze. They all chanted, raising their hands to the sky and following her lead. Dozens of ritual circles expanded through the sky like ripples on a lake. They all spun at different speeds as the blood fog flowed toward them. Once all the blood fog had been lifted from the city, the rings began to spin in reverse, and mystic chi cascaded down, flooding the streets at no cost to Elysia's star core. No wonder the all-seeing eye saw no need to intervene. Just how far ahead into the future can he see? Elysia was in awe once again. Whenever she thought she understood the situation, more was revealed to her. I need to let the people know. They need to understand who saved them. The city was now saturated with mystic chi, giving Elysia near unlimited control via the ritual circles overhead. Since the blood fog had been dealt with, the mortals could now look up at the all-seeing eye in the sky. As gongs continued to echo through the city, people stood staring at the crack in reality. Their eyes were wide, and they seemed afraid despite gazing upon their savior. Elysia grinned. They are clearly all experiencing the joy of the all-seeing eye's gaze. How marvelous. The more their minds break and accept his grace, the more devoted they will be. Mirroring her thoughts, the ritual circles in the sky began to spin aggressively. All at once, the mortals throughout the city collapsed to their knees. Howls and pained screams of celebration resonated through the city as Elysia flooded their minds so they would understand. They had to understand. They did not need to live if their puny little minds couldn't understand the all-seeing eye's grace. Elysia. Her own name thundered in her mind, spoken by her god. Looking toward the rift, she saw the eye of her god glaring at her. We are a peaceful cult that accepts people into our ranks without breaking their minds. You and your family were a unique case. It's better to win mortals over with goodwill and demonstrations. They become more loyal that way. Elysia felt like she had been struck by a lightning bolt of enlightenment. Only the all-seeing eye, an evil god, could develop such a profound kind of mind control. Goodwill. Of course. How hadn't I thought of that before? Twisted kindness is a perfect way to worm into the hearts of others and make them believe they owe you something. I can't force the all-seeing eye's greatness upon people. They need to experience it for themselves. That is the ultimate kindness I could give anyone. Elysia's eyes flickered to the castle that was still a beacon of leaking power, about to explode. Relaxing her arms, Elysia used the mystic chi that had already invaded everyone's minds to spread the word of her god. The Nitro's family has forsaken you all, lost and confused in a fog of your own blood, your death draws near. But fear not, citizens of Nitro's city, not all is lost. Accept the gaze of the all-seeing eye, and feel it down to your soul. The pain you feel now is not an attack, it is the cleansing of your body and soul from the control the Nitro's family once held over you. Elysia utilized the mystic chi to relax everyone's mind and make a calming feeling flow through them, along with her words. She then made the sky crackle with lightning between the spinning rings. With the all-seeing eye to her back, she drew attraction to herself. It was time to show them the power of a mere follower. With the fog lifted, do you see it now? The castle that once served as the home for the ruling Nitro's family, cultivators that promised to protect you from the beast tide, they are gone. In their place, they set it to explode and kill you all. Mystic chi warped around the castle, making it look even worse than it really was. Elysia grinned as she heard shouts of outrage from the streets below. The mortals gathered in the streets at the foot of the mountain were little black dots, almost like ants. Not that she saw them as ants, assuming they became worshippers. Mortal or cultivator, she respected anyone who revered the eternal gaze. A young teen stood with his 5 siblings outside his mother's bakery shop. Tears streamed down his face as he tightly gripped his mother's hand. Their shop's glass front had been smashed in during the chaos earlier. Everyone had gone mad as their faces were eaten by blood, but some had used the opportunity to loot. Nearly every store on the street had been hit. He knew his mother had already been struggling to pay the high taxes and rent to the Nitro's family. He had overheard her soft cries as she sat alone at the dinner table while he stayed hidden on the stairs after putting his brothers and sisters to bed. Now, with all their bread gone, he knew his mother was on the edge of a mental breakdown. But none of that would matter if they all died in an explosion orchestrated by the very people who promised to use those funds to further their cultivation and protect them. He stared up at the sky with a clear mind due to the apparent cleansing of the control the Nitro's family had on his mind. Those cultivators, it's so clear now. They robbed us. Eustace is nothing more than cattle. We work ourselves to death while they enjoy the fruits of our labor. Fear not. With the power vested in me as the vice cult leader for the all-seeing eye, I will annihilate this transgression against you. It was strange. He shouldn't be able to see the woman from so far away or hear her words. Yet they reached him as if she were right before him. The crazed woman in the sky threw her head back and began chanting. O herald of the gaze, devourer of worlds and all who dare to oppose you. Hear this servant call and lend me your strength to bring these hardworking people salvation from this accursed fate. Hardworking people. He looked at his tired mother standing at his side. Had they ever once been acknowledged as hardworking by a cultivator? The bizarre circles in the sky that had freed the land of the blood fog stacked up into a tunnel that seemed to give focus to the godly eye staring down at them through a rift in the sky. From the moment he had laid eyes on it, his brain had broken. Yet now it seemed peaceful as if it was here to help. Which was a stark contrast to how evil it looked. So that eye is the all-seeing eye. Some kind of god. Is it really going to save us? He squeezed his mother's hand with a grim expression. The god looked evil, and the crazed woman said she was part of a cult worshipping them. But maybe they really can. Rifts opened up around the eye, and he felt a chill down to his bones as tendrils of otherworldly darkness snaked through the cracks in reality. At first, it was just a few, but as if the sky was barely holding back a withering mass of tentacles, they just kept pouring out until the entire sky was like a waterfall of slithering darkness. Soon, the castle was utterly drowned in darkness. How can we ever hope to fight something like that? His mother muttered, her face pale with fear. Hopefully, we don't have to, he hissed back so his younger siblings didn't hear. But he wasn't so sure himself. To him, it looked like a tyrant had been squashed to make way for an evil god. C-380. Netherworld. Ashlock watched through his evil eye as Elysia commanded Pluto's tendrils to stop the castle from exploding. Of course, it was merely an illusion. Not that he had told Elysia that. Ashlock worried she wouldn't put on a dramatic enough performance if she didn't believe failure would result in the loss of millions of potential new worshippers. Though I have to say that girl somehow became even more insane. I didn't expect to find her bathing in a pool of blood and animal parts while praying to one of my offspring. Ashlock sighed as he watched Elysia cackle away as she made more of Pluto's tendrils snake their way into heaven's carefully woven reality. Just how broken is her mind to imagine Pluto's body to look this eldritch? Just a few months ago, when they first met, the body Elysia could conjure with mystic chi for Pluto could easily fit in an arena, but now, it looked like the sky might fall like ceiling paint holding back a leak. Is that what Maple's true body looks like? Ashlock mused. Pluto was Maple's little sibling, and they were both worldwalkers, so he doubted they differed that much. The display was quite horrifying and made all the worse as he watched it unfold through his evil eye. Pluto was just darkness in his sight, an all-consuming void that devoured everything it touched. A large inflow of divine energy has been detected. Golden letters flashed before his eye, informing him it had begun. Elysia had spread his name while putting on a performance that even impacted him. It was such a raw display of reality-bending power that even he wouldn't want to mess with Elysia. Yet she happily proclaimed that she was wielding such cataclysmic powers in his name, which would definitely bring their respect for the all-seeing eye to new heights in the minds of the millions of mortals watching. System, what's my current number of sacrificial credits? You have 3,500 sacrificial credits and rapidly counting. That's quite a lot, Ashlock mused as his evil eye swiveled to look at the mortals lining the streets gazing up at him and the castle in fear. Maybe in hindsight, Elysia hadn't been the best one to handle this. This could have been an opportunity to give the cult a new light. Darn it, I should have tried to appear more majestic and benevolent. Ashlock sighed. This display has definitely furthered my evil god image, but I fear that might be the only option moving forward. They had mystic chi on their side, and it could manifest anything, but the problem was that, unlike illusion chi, it only worked if the cultivator fully believed in what they were trying to conjure. Ashlock glanced back at Elysia, whose eyes had rolled back, and she looked possessed as she pulled immense amounts of mystic chi in from her surroundings to manifest Pluto's body. All of her family and the dozens of ritual rings were pumping her with chi, and it looked like she would go supernova any second as Pluto kept coming. Should I tell her that it's just an illusion, and she doesn't need to go this far? Ashlock wondered as he felt a little bad and definitely didn't want Elysia to die or explode, but on the flip side, the insane girl seemed to grow in strength the more she broke, so. I'm sure she will be fine. Ow. Ashlock winced as he felt pain shoot through his root network. He hadn't felt pain like this in a long time, as he had his root network tuned out. It would drive him crazy if he were to experience the fears, concerns, and pains of every tree he was linked to across the realm. So something big had to have happened for the pain to be so extreme it overwhelmed his ability to tune it out. Immediately, he tried to locate the source of the pain. Anything that could cut through so many of his S-grade ethereal roots so effortlessly had to be something at the nascent soul realm. Could it be Vincent? Is he attacking me somewhere? Or maybe the beast tide has reached my roots sooner than expected. Following the pain, all signs pointed toward his roots inside the castle. As Vincent trying to claw his way out like a caged rat and hurting me in the process. Ashlock's vision blurred as he switched to his spiritual sight through his roots inside the castle. All he was met with was an all-consuming darkness. It took a moment for Ashlock to realize what he was surrounded by as he shifted his view through his roots until he could finally see. This looks like the vague remnants of a room, and are those cries of fear. Wait, they aren't Vincent. Why the hell are there maids here? Oh God. The ceiling collapsed as a tendril of void belonging to Pluto crashed through. The wood hissed as it was deleted from existence, and the tendril rushed into the room like a flood of ink. The darkness was Pluto, and it was about to reach three maids cowering in the corner behind a table. Pluto, stop, Ashlock commanded the Worldwalker with abyssal whispers. But the encroaching void did not cease. Pluto, I know you can hear me. Stop what you are doing. Mortals are here, and you are destroying the castle. A deep and otherworldly laugh that reminded Ashlock of a whale calling out through the vast ocean filled not just the room but the entire castle. You may have a leash on my sibling, but you don't control me. I can devour what I please. The void tendril that had crashed into the room suddenly lashed out and plowed through the table and cowering maids. It was unsettling how silently the attack deleted them from existence as if they had never existed. Ashlock didn't understand why Pluto was doing this. Why did you kill the mortals? They don't have any chi worth devouring. They deserve to die as reality is a stain on the void. Before, there was beautiful chaos, but now there is a clear barrier, a divide between the nothingness of the void and the everything of reality. Pluto's voice raised to a thunderous volume that seemed to echo throughout the void. Tell me why I should be born into slavery, to guard something I'm not even allowed to taste. Another void tendril drooped down and slammed through a side wall, silencing another set of distant cries. The castle was still full of hundreds if not thousands of maids, and they would all be devoured by Pluto at this rate. In here, it's beautiful. Pluto continued, the air is sweet and dense with chi. Millions of different organisms are waiting to be savored and minds to be broken. Compared to the void, where even time doesn't flow, how am I supposed to exist knowing what I'm being denied? Ashlock was reminded that the Worldwalkers were realm-devouring monsters. They grew in power by destroying, and it seemed Pluto viewed reality as a golden chest they desperately wanted to open. So when given entry to this paradise, all you seek is to destroy it in childish rage. If you devour it all, there will be nothing left. Ashlock tried to reason with him. Reality will return to the void. Good. Then all will be fair. These puny humans devoid of chi cower before me yet live better lives than I. Another tendril silently shot off through a wall, snuffing out the candle of life on another group of maids. Power is supposed to be all that matters, so why am I denied what is rightfully mine? You are nothing but a foolish and short-sighted child. Ashlock switched his perspective to his evil eye and glared at Elysia. It's over, Elysia. Send Pluto back to the void. Elysia stayed utterly motionless, almost as if she were dead. Her head was to the sky, and she had a manic look of utter fascination as if she were seeing something otherworldly. Enjoying the story? Show your support by reading it on the official site. She is broken. Pluto's laughter echoed through the void, her ego is fractured and adrift. She barely has any will of her own, allowing me to easily overpower and giving me free reign. I know. Ashlock flooded Elysia with his presence and saw the girl grin. This crazy girl surrendered her soul to me. Elysia's head slowly rolled forward, and she looked down at Pluto. Which lets me do things like this, he said through Elysia's mouth as she pointed a finger at Pluto. No. That shouldn't be possible. Complete soul dominion. Pluto's body squirmed aggressively as tendrils moved away from the castle and began spiraling up toward Elysia. That's impossible. How can she still be alive? Because I'm a divine being, and her faith in me is unwavering, Ashlock said through Elysia again. Lies. Pluto thundered. I have tried to achieve soul dominion over her this whole time but was unsuccessful. Her soul should be extinguished by your presence, not embracing it. This is why I called you a foolish child. True power does not always lie in your own overwhelming strength, Tendrils of divine energy shaped by Elysia's mystic chi exploded out of her hand and met the void tendrils attempting to spiral up and devour her. Even the heavens rely on others to manage reality, and it looks like I'll have to do my job as a divine being to vanquish an encroaching voidling. No. Pluto roared as his entire body surged upward, you can't send me back. I've spent too long preparing Elysia as my gateway to invading reality, only for you to stand in my way. I refuse to accept this. Use that overwhelming power you are so proud of to stay then. Ashlock sneered via Elysia as he increased the divine energy tendrils tenfold and began forcefully collapsing Pluto's body despite the Worldwalker's best efforts to maintain his form. After all, the body was not Pluto's. It was crafted from Elysia's imagination. An otherworldly scream echoed through the void as Pluto was utterly overwhelmed. Ashlock almost found it laughable that this Worldwalker truly believed he could do as he pleased while using his worshipper. Ashlock, you are losing control. What? Ashlock was surprised by the golden system message flashing before his vision. Losing control. Over what? Divine energy. You are using Elysia as a gateway to channel an incredible amount of divine energy from the millions of mortals enthralled by the display of your power. This is a valid use of the gathered divine energy, but power comes at a price. Using divine energy in this way deprives your sacrificial credits of being able to multiply as much as they could, as you will shortly lose your domain over the spent divine energy, and it will return to the heavens. Ashlock glared at the system message, enraged. This stupid Worldwalker's power trip and hunger had cost him precious sacrificial credits. That wouldn't do at all. He would give Maple an earful about his sibling once this was over, but for now, he needed a solution. He refused to humor the idea of losing out on such a boon in such a dumb way. Channeling his rage into the divine tendrils, Elysia's eyes glowed with a purple-gold hue as he quickly extinguished Pluto from the realm, sending the bastard back to the cold darkness he came from. Elysia, you did well, Ashlock said through her in a hushed whisper before withdrawing his presence. Her whole body went limp for a second before she caught herself from falling off her flying sword. Now, system, what should we do? Ashlock said as he gazed down at the half-eaten castle. It was as if someone had poured lava over it with how the walls had deteriorated. Despite its destroyed appearance, it gave off the feeling of a holy site with how much divine energy was swirling around the structure. As the system had informed him, this was divine energy that had been directed toward him from the mortals due to Elysia's terrifying display, but instead of absorbing and directing it toward his divine stock market to grow his number of sacrificial credits, it had been used to fight Pluto and was now almost out of his control. Suggestion. Channel the raw divine energy into a gacha draw. I'm unsure of the outcome, but it's bound to have a significant impact on the draw, whether it be a summon, item, mutation, or a new skill. Ashlock hadn't expected such a suggestion. It had been a long time since he had entertained the idea of a gacha draw due to how risky it was and the level of threats he faced. However, he was being advised to do some gambling. How could he possibly say no? How many sacrificial credits do I have right now? 5938 sacrificial credits and climbing. Phew, that's a lot. What would that result in? An SSS grade draw, at least. Maybe even higher. Maybe I should wait until it climbs a little higher. But you will soon reach the maximum number of sacrificial credits your inner world can support, and my hold on the divine energy is loosening. Oh yeah, I forgot there was a limit to how many sacrificial credits I can have at once, but that increases with how many worshippers I have, right? Yes, but the mortals of Nitro City are not yet worshippers. If anything, they fear you and your power more than revere you. What's the difference? A worshipper will provide a steady amount of divine energy that can be used to nurture a sacrificial credit tree and multiply it. Meanwhile, someone who fears you will only give a burst of divine energy upon witnessing an act that instills that deep fear. Humans keep memories and ideas that terrify them out of their consciousness until reminded of their existence. Because living in fear is a twisted form of self-torture. It's better to turn a blind eye and drown out things that weigh deeply on one's mind, just like how I tune out my offspring. I see what you mean now. Ashlock sighed but didn't lose hope. He could still turn these people into worshippers. All he had to do was deploy the cult to the streets armed with gift baskets of pills and smiles. Okay. If my sacrificial credits are about to reach their limit and this divine energy will go to waste, let's do the gacha draw now. Idolatry Daily Sign in System. Day 3643. Daily Credit 77. Sacrifice Credit 6117. Sign in. Are you sure? Over 6,000 credits will be used on a random draw. Of course, I'm sure. There's still some Nitro's elders to devour for dessert anyway. Very well. Sign in successful, 6,194 credits consumed. Unlocked an SSS grade summon. Netherworld Wraith. An SSS grade summon. It had been a long time since he had drawn a summon, the last being Kada, but he had slowly leveled his summons up through the grades. What would an SSS grade summon even be capable of? Would it rival a monarch realm or perhaps even surpass them in strength? Where is it? Ashlock asked as he noticed the divine energy swirling around the castle suddenly take on a hint of sinister darkness. This is bad. Ashlock didn't need to be told. He could feel it. The coming of death. What is happening? You are not yet strong enough to wholly control the ego of an S-grade being, let alone an SSS grade 1. The darkened divine energy began to condense around a vague figure in the castle's center. We may have just welcomed an uncontrollable harbinger of death into the realm. A harbinger of death. Just what is a netherworld wraith? It's a being born from the intersection of death and life and is said to feast on lost souls. They are neither alive nor dead and are said to inhabit the liminal space between the realms. They can traverse reality effortlessly since they exist on the bridge between life and death. I believe netherworld wraiths can phase through physical matter and can't be harmed by conventional means. Why have I never encountered them before? They exist on a different plane of existence to us and are also egoless beings. They don't know how to seek out sustenance, they simply float around the liminal space between the realms and devour any souls in reach like jellyfish. If it's egoless, why can't I control it easily despite being SSS grade? What is there to control? Without an ego, it has no brain. Not thoughts or desires that can be altered to suit your needs. So we just need to give it an ego, right? One that's already under my control. You want to transplant an ego into an SSS grade being. It would have to be one you have a firm grasp on, is of at least the nascent soul realm, and has a deep understanding of soul Tao. I happen to know just the girl for the job, Ashlock said. There was no way he was letting a netherworld wraith wreak havoc right after he had vanquished Pluto back to the void. This was his realm, and his alone to conquer. It sure is quiet, Nox muttered as her dryad form lay in a field of white flowers around her tree. Ever since she had inherited the Dark Throne and learned the Shadow Chi law, she had been left to oversee a pocket realm called Tartarus. She had worked hard to set it up in preparation for members of the All-Seeing Eye to train here, but nothing had happened yet. The others must be busy. Sigh, I just wish someone would visit me, Nox sat up with slothful grace. All around, there was nothing but darkness. It might as well be the void, and she was starting to get lonely. This is the most powerful I have ever been, yet I have never felt more trapped than now. A sad chuckle escaped her lips. I know they said it was lonely at the top, but I didn't imagine this. A sudden message in golden letters manifested before her face. Ashlock has requested to implant your dryad soul into an SSS grade spiritual being. Doing so will promote the summoned netherworld wraith to a mythical grade being. Do you accept? Mythical grade. What in the 9 realms does that mean? Chapter 381. Mythical grade. Nox was unsure if she should trust the words floating before her. It claimed Ashlock needed her to make a decision, but it used too many terms that she had never heard of. SSS grade. Mythical being. Netherworld wraith. Nox raised her hand, and it effortlessly passed through the floating golden words, but they did shimmer in reaction to her chi, meaning they were likely carved out of divine energy. Is another diving being trying to tempt me away from Ashlock? It just seems too suspicious. Nox, accept the system message. Ashlock's voice, along with his presence, surged through the ethereal roots connecting her tree body to the root network. His tone was filled with urgency. Whatever this system message thing was, it seemed important. Oh. Okay. I accept, Nox said without another thought. If Ashlock needed her to do something, she had no reason to protest. The golden words swam through the air to rearrange themselves into a new message. Which soul do you wish to sacrifice? Sacrifice. Nox's eyes widened. Was she talking to a demon? She was willing to do almost anything to repent for her past life's sins, but while she was lonely, she still enjoyed living. Sacrificing her soul was a bit. You have 2 souls of comparable strength. While your memories are linked, you are essentially 2 separate entities. Pick which one to sacrifice. Nox glanced at her tree. It was true, she had used her family's most difficult technique, Shadow Soul, to divide her soul in 2 so she could create this dryad form to give herself mobility and the ability to talk to people. While being a tree had advantages, she had lived too long as a human to not desire a humanoid form. By using Shadow Soul, she could live the best of both worlds. But as the message had said, Her memories were linked. While possessing two distinct vessels, she was still one. If either her dryad or tree soul were to perish, she would become half of the person she once was. Memories would be lost, and her personality would completely change. What exactly do you mean by sacrificed? Nox understood Ashlock seemed in a hurry, but this was still a big decision, and considering she was given a choice in the first place, maybe she could say no. On the scale, your soul is currently at the level of an S-grade being. The reason I say sacrificed is because I will be trying to implant your soul into an SSS grade being, which is incomparably stronger than you, and netherworld wraiths are known to devour souls, it's their only food source. So there is a high probability of failure, resulting in the netherworld wraith consuming your soul. Right. Nox nursed her head as she reread the words floating before her 3 times. If it's so incomparably stronger than me, do I even have a chance of success? A slim one, yes. The netherworld wraith is egoless, meaning the vessel acts purely on instincts. If it had an ego, taking it over and achieving soul dominion over it would be utterly impossible for you. Also, it's currently in the process of manifesting, meaning it's in a weakened state. You're our best bet, Ashlock added. The netherworld wraith seems to have aspects of shadow chi, meaning your shadow chi law can overpower it. You also have a good grasp of soul Dao, and your cultivation level is among the highest in the sect. I see. Nox sighed and looked at her peaceful field of flowers, and dare I ask, what happens if I say no? We might all die. If the netherworld wraith finishes manifesting without an ego I can control, it will begin feasting on any soul within range. Even if we all came together, I'm not sure we could stop it. SSS grade is a level of power that is likely beyond monarch realm. Meaning nothing on the 9th layer of creation can defeat it. Nox bit her lip. So, hypothetically, if I succeed at taking control of this netherworld wraith, would that make me the most powerful being in the realm? Potentially, yes. Though it's unlikely that you will be able to unleash the full potential of a netherworld wraith from the start. While the vessel will be at the mythical grade, your soul will still be at the S grade. A soul can't jump multiple realms of power and not implode. Nox nodded in understanding. So I will have the body of a super powerful being, but I will be limited to outputting whatever level of techniques my current nascent soul realm soul is capable of. That's crazy. With Tartarus and Ashlock's ability to invade pocket realms, I can cultivate my soul to catch up to the netherworld wraith quickly. But I still don't understand just how strong I can be. What does mythical grade mean if SSS grade is so powerful that nothing in the realm can stand against it? Does that mean I'll be like a god once my soul can utilize its full potential? Nox asked. She assumed these strange terms Ashlock and these floating words were using were some kind of knowledge or way of categorizing things only known between divine beings. It was relatively intuitive, but she did have to wonder if a snake god came up with the naming scheme, considering how many S's were being thrown around. Mythical grade is undefinable. However, it would be impossible for a mythical grade being to use their full strength down here on the 9th layer of creation without earning the ire of the heavens. Nox was starting to get the full picture. They wanted to put her soul into an egoless vessel that had a high probability of eating her. But should she succeed, she would gain a new body at a level of strength unreachable for another on the 9th layer of creation. If I can wield such power, I can keep my promise of protecting the Ashfallen sect from almost any threat. Nox's eyes flared with determination. If I'm so valuable to the sect, there's no way I will be left alone to guard an empty pocket realm anymore. Okay. Nox balled her fists. You can take my soul inhabiting this dryad body as I assume a soul used to a more humanoid body will fare better. Netherworld wraiths aren't known to have any fixed shape. They are soul-devouring spiritual beings that exist on a plane between realities that shouldn't even exist, so either of your souls would be fine, but I agree the dryad one is the better choice. Nox thought about it for a moment but was sure she wanted to keep her tree soul around. It was the body Ashlock had given her, and she wasn't about to sacrifice it. All right, I'm ready, Nox said after sitting down cross-legged in the field of white flowers. This will be an excruciatingly painful experience, and it will take all your willpower to hold your ego together. You will be walking a thin line between success and soul death. There is no margin for error. Nox glared at the words. I already said I was ready. How is this supposed to motivate me? I will now begin. First, I am going to melt away your vessel and free your soul. Wait. What? Ah. She threw her head back as the most unfathomable pain shot up her spine. Through her blurring vision, she saw her tree body blazing with lilac soul flames and dozens of void tendrils piercing her back. Black thorn-covered vines had also erupted between the white flowers and pierced her body. She was being eaten alive. Love this story. Find the genuine version on the author's preferred platform and support their work. I'm going to need you to hold still. An immense force locked her body in place, and she was unable to even close her eyes. All she could do was stare at the words floating before her face and howl through the pain. I understood this would be painful, but I thought that would begin later. I haven't even seen the Netherworld Wraith, yet I'm already experiencing so much pain. Almost done. Nox couldn't see the state of her body as she couldn't even switch her view to her tree body, but from the floating words, she discerned that there wasn't much left of the dryad body she had spent so long meticulously crafting. It was a shame to see it go, but she wouldn't achieve much if left here in a pocket realm. It was time for Ashfallen City's guardian to reclaim her position. Suddenly, the telekinetic force locking her in place pulled her free. She was an intangible ball of black power floating in the air for a split moment before she hurtled toward the ground, only to go through the flowers and end up inside an ethereal root. Her world blurred as she was dragged through the tunnel at immense speed, and not even seconds later, she erupted out and was now overlooking a vast city. As this Nitro's city, Nox wondered as many bad memories resurfaced. She had gone here many times as a hunter to sell items at one of the many auction houses littering the Blood Lotus sect's capital city. Looking around for the city's most famous landmark, her spiritual gaze landed on a half-destroyed castle. It looked like a dragon's fierce breath had melted the structure from the top. She could also feel an intense sense of death radiating from the place as tainted divine energy swirled around the place. The Netherworld Wraith is still manifesting in the center of the castle, Ashlock said in her mind. Unlike the system, all I have to tell you is good luck, and if you succeed, consider all your past sins forgiven. You will have saved us all. Nox sighed. Despite the more positive tone, Ashlock's words made her even more nervous than what the golden words had said. I'll try my best, she said while looking up at the giant eye gazing down through reality. Ashlock really is starting to feel like a genuine god. While his true strength is only a few stages in the nascent soul realm above mine, the difference between us is staggering. I'm not even sure that taking over the Netherworld Wraith will close the gap between us. It's not that she wanted to surpass Ashlock. She just wanted him to deem her helpful to whatever schemes he devised. Nox didn't have any more time to contemplate her goals as she was once again flying, this time right toward the swirling chaos of tainted divine energy in the castle. As she closed in, she could see the vague outline of a figure, and it was this being that she was hurtling toward. The tainted divine energy burned her, and she felt like she was drowning in boiling water as the telekinetic force that had been dragging her ceased. She was on her own, floating through the chaos. Pushing through the pain of having her soul boiled alive, she tried to keep herself together and sought out the forming Netherworld Wraith. Ashlock watched through his evil eye with bated breaths as he saw the flickering ball of darkness that was Nox's soul merging with the Netherworld Wraith. It was not a joke to say this moment defined the future of the ninth layer of creation and possibly the entire 9 realms. Now I remember why I held back from saving up ridiculous amounts of credits in the past, Ashlock said as he recalled his failed summoning of Maple back when he was still basically a sapling. Who's to say an SSS grade skill wouldn't tear my soul apart if I tried to use it, or what if I received an SSS grade cursed item with an ego of its own? While the system is my golden finger in this world, power comes with responsibility, and if I get greedy and aim above my capabilities, we end up with a situation like this. If Nox fails, I might have just invited my own demise. A Netherworld Wraith was a spiritual being able to phase through reality, meaning physical attacks would be useless, and due to its ridiculously high cultivation level, it was unlikely that any chi attacks anyone on this layer of creation could conjure would leave a lasting wound on the thing. System, how do you even summon things? I offer up a bounty of divine energy and capture the first being that answers the call. In this case, we offered so much that it seems our reach extended to the space between realms, and it just so happened for a Netherworld Wraith to be nearby, which is incredibly unlucky. They are as rare as finding a star in the cosmos. There were a lot of stars in the cosmos, but compared to the vastness of space, Ashlock understood what the system was saying. There are a lot of Netherworld Wraiths out there, cleaning up wandering souls that somehow escaped the cycle of reincarnation. But the chances of opening a random portal in space and being next to a star were near zero. What would you say is the percentage chance of Nox succeeding? 5% at most. I'm unsure if it's even possible to transplant an ego into an egoless vessel. I don't think it's ever been done before. Ashlock gazed down at the swirling chaos with newfound fear. There wasn't any bloodlust radiating off the forming netherworld wraith like he would experience from an enemy with an ego. It was simply the cold feeling of certain death. Bloodlust was like being faced down by a hungry tiger, snarling and drooling as it circles you with deep hunger in its eyes. Meanwhile, the feeling coming from the netherworld wraith was like standing there and watching a star system sun exploding in the sky. No weapon, prayers, or hope could save someone in that situation. All they could do was wait for certain death. Let's say Nox fails. Do you have any ideas on ways we could kill it? Would my void tendrils work? No, it can phase through realms and is therefore immune to the void that lies between them. What about Larry? Can he decay it? The netherworld wraith has no tangible form to decay. It's a spiritual being. Ashlock sighed. This is cheating. That's an SSS grade summon lured here with an insane amount of gathered divine energy for you. In a twisted way, we should be glad we didn't accidentally summon another deity. I don't think they would have taken your attempts to control them lightly. I guess there is some good to be found in every bad situation. Ashlock was now even more glad he had given Nox a second chance at life, and he began to wonder if karma existed. He would be facing doom if he had simply devoured her for credits. Nox was, ironically, his ray of light in the darkness right now. Come on, Nox. I believe you can do it. Ashlock quietly cheered as he intently watched. Minutes passed, and he began to lose hope. The tiny ball of darkness that was Nox's soul began to flicker like a dying flame. We should start preparing for the worst. If the netherworld wraith finishes forming without Nox being in control, its soul pressure alone will lock everything in place, including Larry and Anubis. There will be no way to save them. Not yet, Ashlock replied. Nox is still alive, if barely. Ashlock, if she fails. She won't. Ashlock dared not take his eye off her. Besides, if she fails, it's over for us. As a tree, he could not move. He was stuck here, and if there was an undefeatable foe, it was only a matter of time before the netherworld wraith floated to Red Vine Peak and killed him. A house near the castle suddenly exploded. It happened so fast that Ashlock hadn't caught the shadow tendril that was now jutting out of the swirling chaos. The destroyed house's tiles hadn't even finished shattering on the ground when another shadow tendril shot out and took out two multi-story buildings this time. Is that Nox's doing? Ashlock sure hoped so. I don't think so. The system trailed off as more shadow tendrils emerged from the chaos with dead mortal maids skewered on them. There were hundreds. The shadow tendrils extended into the sky, putting them all on display. What is happening? The netherworld wraith is preparing for a soul harvest. A what? All at once, the corpses withered to dust that fell and drifted off in the wind. The shadow tendrils that had once supported the corpses slammed down, obliterating the surrounding area, including what was left of the castle. The swirling, corrupted divine energy began to condense, and something rose from the chaos. It was a tall, wraith-like woman with a body made of twisted roots and ghostly branches. Even through his evil eye, Ashlock struggled to keep her in focus. Her form shimmered between reality and somewhere else. The woman looked around with translucent, glowing white eyes. Atop her head was a crown of dark wooden antlers that radiated the chill of death as she rose into the air, giving Ashlock a better look at her ethereal body that trailed a cape of shadowy tendrils as if she needed to stay connected to the ground that was now far below her. The netherworld wraith continued to rise until she was right below his evil eye, gazing through a rift. I can finally see what you truly are. The wraith cracked a smile. Nox? Ashlock asked apprehensively. The voice certainly didn't sound anything like her. The wraith nodded. It's me. SSS grade summon deemed successful. What was once an egoless being known to devour wandering souls between realms has become capable of critical thinking. In light of this, a new variant of the netherworld wraith has been registered as Netherwood Wraith due to Nox's unique appearance and given the grade of mythical. Summons list updated. Netherwood Wraith. Nox mythical. Herald of the Divine Ash. Larry. S. Midnight Ink Lindworm. Kata B. Ashlock dismissed the system messages. They had avoided the worst case scenario, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. He wasn't sure what Nox had seen, and more importantly, was Nox still an ally? C-382. Sovereign of the Veil. Ashlock stared down at Nox through his evil eye. He saw that her soul spread throughout the Netherwood Wraith's body like spirit roots. You aren't in total control, are you? Ashlock said. If he looked at any other person or monster, their soul would have a focal point, and its influence would spread equally throughout the vessel. On the other hand, Nox was like a parasite that had taken root inside the Netherwood Wraith. Almost as if she was controlling the body like a puppet rather than being its absolute master. I'm not, Nox agreed, I feel like I'm using my own soul as a leash to keep a feral beast under control, and it's hungry. Her translucent white eyes glowed. So hungry. For souls. Nox nodded. If I don't eat some soon, I fear I will start to consume myself. I can see why netherworld wraiths are egoless. If they had minds, they would surely go insane from this hunger. You remind me of Maple, just a lot worse, I suppose. As a worldwalker who grew from devouring, I had to turn a blind eye to many of his antics, as restraining him would only lead to him turning on me. Same with Larry. I had to let him go off and feast, and I'm ashamed to admit he brought back a fair number of mortal corpses for me, and there were a fair number of rumors among the mortals about him hunting in the woods. Sorry. Nox gave what he assumed was supposed to be a reassuring smile, but on the face of a mythical great herald of death, it sent a chill through his bark. This is the best I can do for now. Once my soul's cultivation level matches my vessel, I will be able to control myself better. But I think the hunger for souls will never go away, as there's a clear disconnect between my soul and this body hungers. Okay. We can work with this. Anything is better than the other outcome, which was your soul death and a very hungry SSS grade being floating around in search of any soul it could get its shadowy tendrils on. Ashlock swiveled his evil eye to look around at the surroundings and reactions of the populace. It was suffice to say that it was not looking good. Elysia's display of summoning Pluto had already been quite intense, but then the netherworld wraith was summoned, blanketing the whole city in a feeling of certain death. I fear my dream of having a good image will be an uphill battle from here. Ashlock returned to Nox. Why exactly did you skewer hundreds of maids and turn them to dust? Was that you or the netherworld wraith? Oh, that was me, Nox replied casually. What? Don't look at me like that. I managed to seize control over the netherworld wraith's body for a split moment, but my soul was about to extinguish, so I had no choice. I had to use the netherworld wraith's ability to feed on souls to empower myself, or else I would be the one devoured. Wait, you can use soul harvest to empower your soul. Soul harvest. Is that what it's called? Nox paused. I suppose just like a parasite that invades a body and feeds off that body's food supply, I can do the same. I didn't think much about it at the time, it just felt natural. But yeah, I suppose I can grow in strength simply by devouring the souls of others, or soul harvest, as you call it. That's quite insane, right? It is, Ashlock agreed. It's how I grew in power so quickly, as did Maple and Larry. Human cultivators must sit and absorb chi, while we can grow in strength by stealing the chi from those we kill. That's unfair. What would you say your current strength is? Ashlock asked curiously. He needed to know where to send her to feast on souls. Nox looked down at her body as if it would give her the answer. I'm not sure, to be honest. My soul's strength is still in the lower stages of the nascent soul realm, and I cannot use many of this body's innate talents as they use Tao's I'm unfamiliar with, such as death, life, spirit, and dimensions. But if you were to just let go and let the netherworld wraith take over? Ashlock asked. Those were all things the body had been capable of using without an ego, so they had to be built into its DNA of sorts. Nox's gaze darkened. Then I doubt anything could stop me, but there's no guarantee I'll be able to wrestle back control, and if that happens. Ashlock had expected as much. The problem was Nox couldn't wield the Taos with intention as she didn't have the knowledge. It was almost as if she were piloting a plane and didn't know what the buttons did except the autopilot feature, which would rob her of control but let the aircraft perform as intended. Yeah, Ashlock sighed, we will need to be very careful about that. He paused, and his tone turned more serious. You said that you could finally see what I truly am. What did you mean by that? Nox's translucent white eyes glowed again. They were creepy and alien-like. It's hard to explain, but to me, reality doesn't look real anymore. Her head tilted. It's as if I am disconnected, looking at reality from the beyond. Almost as if I'm in the walls. The system had said that netherworld wraiths could phase through reality effortlessly. Did Nox see the world like someone using wall hacks in a video game? Like X-ray vision. The only thing that's real in my eyes are souls, Nox explained. That's what I meant by the fact I could see what you truly are, and now I understand why there was such a gap between us. What do you mean a gap between us? We are both in the nascent soul realm, a mere few stages apart. Yet your soul pressure and ability to influence the world were on the level of a god. Not of a nascent soul realm cultivator. Nox gestured around at the destroyed city, but now I can see it, feel it. Your presence is everywhere. As far as your roots reach, so does your control. The entire ground is dyed a lilac hue. Nox twisted her head. stared toward the east, and licked her lips. Even from here, your soul smells delicious. Nox, I don't know how I feel about being called delicious by the mythical grade being known to dine on souls for breakfast. That earned a haunted laugh out of the Netherwood wraith. I'm not joking. If I left this body to do as it pleased, you are like a beacon that echoes across the land. Like a moth to a flame, the Netherworld wraith would have likely ignored everything here and floated straight for you. Ashlock had never thought of his presence in such a way. It was true his soul's reach covered a very large area, but it hadn't occurred to him that anything able to see or smell souls would be drawn toward him. Just for the sake of argument, he chuckled nervously. Now that you have taken over the body, do you have any weaknesses I could know about? You know, just in case. Unauthorized reproduction. This story has been taken without approval. Report sightings. Nox replied after contemplating. Soul and spiritual attacks would be effective, I suppose. Soul attacks to kill me, and then spiritual ones to destroy this body. I don't think I have either of those, Ashlock grumbled. The best he could think of was his abyssal whispers skill that attacked a person's consciousness, but he doubted an egoless netherworld wraith would have cared much for his illusions or words. Nox nodded. Soul attacks are incredibly rare, and that just so happens to be what a netherworld wraith is capable of. I can simply phase through reality, including a person's body, and feast on the soul directly. Terrifying, Ashlock said with all seriousness. Final question then, are you still loyal? That last word felt hard to say as, in a way, he liked to think of those around him as his friends, but he was also well aware that most of them were kept in order via oaths he had them take or because being near him granted them resources that helped advance their own cultivation. I'm saddened you even felt the need to ask, Nox replied in the best way possible. Of course I am, and I hope I can be useful moving forward, though I am getting ravenous. There's a limit to how much I can resist this body's desires. Ashlock let out a long sigh of relief. That's great to hear, and I'll let you go to hunt in a moment, but first, we need to do some damage control and harvest some more divine energy. He wasn't done until he had milked every last drop of divine energy from the population of Nitro City, and then he would go and do it again to every city in the Blood Lotus sect until everyone across the wilderness either feared or revered his name. He was on a roll, and there was no reason to let up now. Elysia, Ashlock said into the mind of his vice cult leader, who was lying sideways on her sword and looking at Nox in utter fascination. Meet. He trailed off as he realized something. He wanted to make Nox into a figure for his cult. Her sheer cultivation strength aside, she looked the part and radiated an ominous presence. If the world decided he was an evil god, he would play into it. Switching back to Nox, he explained the situation. I think you should pick a new name or persona for your Netherwood wraith body and keep the name Nox for your tree body in Tartarus. Any suggestions? Nox drew up a blank. Let me think. What about Nixelia? Nox was the name for the goddess of the night in Roman mythology, while Nyx was the name for the goddess of the night in Greek mythology. The significant difference between them was the level of importance and power they had over their respective myths. While Nox was important as one of the original gods, her role in Roman myths is more symbolic than central. Nyx was one of the primordial deities born from chaos and the mother to many of the important gods, including the gods of death and sleep. Nyx was a powerful and mysterious figure, often feared even by Zeus, the king of the gods. He added alia to the end of Nyx because it meant other, in Latin. Since she already had a soul named after the goddess of night, Ashlock felt adding this suffix helped differentiate the two. He could have suggested any random name, but he liked to give his close subjects names with deeper meanings, at least to him. Especially since he had discovered that the names he gave his ents and summons held importance and could be carried down. Nox thought for a while before nodding. I like it. Okay. Ashlock switched back to Elysia. This is Nixelia, a demigod of the night in service to me. He referred to her as such as Nixelia could only control Shadow Dao as of now. I need you to announce her arrival to the populace and inform them she was summoned here to vanquish the Nitro's family. We are doing damage control here as I bet the population's opinion of her is rather sour after watching her obliterate a few buildings and suck the souls out of 100 maids. Ashlock was unsure if Elysia listened to a word he said. She leapt off her sword at Nixelia and embraced her in a tight koala-like hug. Her whole body trembled, and her eyes widened. Yes, she gasped to the sky with a crazed look, this must be what dying for my God feels like. Oh, this feeling of death, it's so cold, right down to my soul. Nixelia looked utterly unimpressed. Elysia, get off me, or I'll eat your soul. Oh heavens. Please do, Elysia begged, eat me up, devour everything I have. If it can savor the taste of one such as yourself in service to my god, I'm willing. Nixelia plucked Elysia off herself with a shadow tendril and threw the crazed girl toward her floating sword. Elysia cackled as she spiraled through the air before catching her sword. Good restraint, Ashlock complimented Nixelia. I thought you might devour her for a moment. Nixelia shook her head. Her soul, how can I explain it? Her face twisted in disgust. It's so corrupted it might as well be rotten food. If I devoured it, I think I might get sick. Ashlock burst out laughing. Elysia was so broken that even an egoless netherworld wraith might float away from her, and the idea that a cultivator of Nixelia's level could get sick was hilarious. I'm serious, Nixelia said with a straight face. Keep that thing away from me. Elysia was hanging from her flying sword like a monkey bar and had a saddened expression. My god laughs at me, and my demi-goddess rejects my love. Maybe I'd like you more if you do what was asked of you, Nixelia said, impatience evident in her voice. She was getting hungry, and her mood was turning sour. Really? Elysia clambered on top of her sword and cleared her throat. Ahem. Mystic chi that was still swirling throughout the city from earlier pulsed and carried her words to the minds of all who would listen. People of Nitro City, you are saved. While I have managed to rescue the city from destruction, the Nitro's family's stranglehold on this city's populace runs deep. In light of this, in his infinite wisdom, the all-seeing eye has summoned his herald, Nixelia, sovereign of the Vale, to bring death upon those beyond saving, such as the maids of the castle from earlier and the members of the Nitro's family still here in the city. Please sit back and relax as we leave it to Nixelia to bring salvation. Sovereign of the Vale, Nixelia said, sounding unimpressed. It's your stage name. Elysia winked. Sounds cool, right? Now go devour some souls or something to please the all-seeing eye and get us some new worshippers. Maybe I should have stayed in Tartarus, Nixelia sighed. She sounded exhausted. Ashlock opened a portal that led back to Ashfallen City. Elysia, head back to Ashfallen City and gather the cult. I need everyone possible to take to the streets, offering welcome packages and spreading the name of the cult. Okay. Elysia didn't hesitate and went to fulfill his orders. Meanwhile, Nixelia, Ashlock paused as a system message flashed before his face. +432 SC. Looks like I finished devouring those two Nitro's guardians, and as suspected, they were nothing more than dessert due to our cultivation difference, but that's fine. It gives me a nice sum to start multiplying with divine energy. Ashlock mused before telling Nixelia, you must be hungry. You see those Nitro's elders being held down by Larry. Eat a few of them and make a scene out of it. We want the population to see how easily you deal with the tyrants that have been lording over them for far too long. Nixelia slowly rotated upon her rising spiral of shadowy tendrils and looked straight down the central street where the Nitro's elders were cowering under Larry's soul pressure. The mythical being licked her lips as shadow tendrils shot out and grabbed them like a frog hunting for flies. 5 elders of the Nitro's family, varying in age and gender, were displayed high above the city. They cried out curses, but they fell on deaf ears. Moments later, their lives were snuffed out, and their ultraspeed regeneration proved useless at preventing their soulless husks from disintegrating into dust, just like the maids had before them. Nixelia let out a satisfied moan as their souls flowed down the shadow tendrils and were harvested. However, the satisfaction seemed short-lived. Not even moments later, the hunger returned to her eyes. This time, it was even more fierce than before. Sorry, Ashlock. Now that I've had a taste, I need to go. I can't stay here, Nixelia said between gasps. What? Where are you going? Ashlock asked, but his words fell on nothing. Nixelia was gone. She simply phased out of existence without a trace. Well, shit. Ashlock was deathly worried about where Nixelia had gone, but he couldn't even feel her presence anymore. It was as if she had never existed. Deciding to focus on the task at hand and deal with a hungry mythical being later, he opened portals to Ashfallen City near the castle, and people wearing his cult's cloaks poured into the streets. Satisfied, he was about to leave to search for Nixelia and talk to Stella about what had happened, as he was sure she was worried alongside the others, when someone caught his eye. Grand Elder Starweaver. Why is he the only one left? It would seem that the other Grand Elders had taken the opportunity to escape during the chaos. Only the Starweaver Grand Elder remained. He was kneeling on the ground. His eyes were glowing gold, and he was staring up at the sky with a look of horror. I guess the threads of fate are showing him something quite nasty, Ashlock chuckled. I hope it's not about me. C-383. Net positive. Nixelia had to get as far away from Ashlock as she could. His all-encompassing presence that blanketed the land was all too enticing. It was as if Nitro City's streets were slathered in sweet honey while she was starving. No, she was absolutely ravenous. It was driving her insane as her netherwood wraith body was trying to devour her from within. It's fine. It's going to be okay. I'm okay. Nixelia leaned on her other soul in Tartarus to maintain her sanity. If not for it serving as a mental rock, she would have lost control back there. The feeling of harvesting power straight from another, it was intoxicating. It felt like cheating, as if her entire life until now had been a lie. All those decades spent hiding away in dark moss-filled caves, meditating while droplets of water trickled down her face as she slowly became one with the darkness, now felt like a waste. It had been agonizing, but at the time, the growth in cultivation had been worth it. But now she could grow in a different way, so to sat her hunger, she had run away toward distant souls. As evening fell, there was a feeling of unease and terror in the wilderness beyond Nitro City as shadow tendrils struck out relentlessly from a withering mass phasing in and out of reality. Nixelia feasted on anything and everything that had a heartbeat and, more importantly, a soul. They were all so weak, like little fireflies in the night. Ashlock was like a blazing sun of power in comparison to these insects. Nixelia glanced toward the east, where the sea of power converged, Red Vine Peak. She was far enough away to barely resist, but even from out here, she could still see his vast presence dominating a large part of the wilderness. Maybe a tiny taste of Ashlock's soul would be fine. He wouldn't even notice. No, these insects will do. Nixelia returned to devouring anything she could get her tendrils on. While she referred to these monsters as insects because they might as well have been when compared to her cultivation level, some were tree-sized monsters in the soulfire realm, yet they died all the same. Hundreds of monsters perished within minutes. And the wilderness, once home to a chorus of howls and sounds of battle, had fallen deathly silent. The only evidence of the one-sided slaughter was a breeze carrying a cloud of soulless dust to sprinkle across the grass in Nixelia's wake as she moved further west, deeper into the Blood Lotus sect's territory. Between each city in the Blood Lotus sect and other demonic sects were vast, untamed swaths of land known to cultivators as the wilderness. Here, animals were mutated by the ambient chi into monsters. Cultivators usually had little reason to interact with these monsters. They rarely made it to the Star Core realm, as making it to such a stage required protection from others, something most monsters found hard to come by. Because of this, cultivators could fly over them on guarded airships without wasting their chi. I used to be the same. I always dreaded long trips through the wilderness between cities to delve into rifts and sell my wares, as I would have to waste chi flying on my sword or battling through the endless wilderness. But now, I gain power the more I kill. Yet why am I only getting hungrier the more I devour? Am I losing control over this body? It was a terrifying thought. After experiencing such a ridiculous way to gather chi, there was no way she could go back to her old way of gathering chi as a tree or human. She wanted to continue living as a netherwood wraith. So why? Why did she hunger so? Let's think. Ashlock said he gained power through harvesting the souls of others, yet he never slaughtered everything in his vicinity like I have so far. Nixelia paused near a calm lake and focused intently on the peaceful water illuminated by streaks of sunlight in a vain attempt to relax her ravenous hunger. Unfortunately, all she could see were the tiny white orbs that were souls belonging to fish in the lake's depths. Wait, tiny white orbs. Nixelia extended a shadowy tendril and watched intently. It passed through the water, and she noticed her hunger worsen slightly. The tendril then made contact with the fish. She pulled on the netherwood wraith's innate soul harvest ability, and her hunger worsened considerably. However, once the little white orb was pulled free and absorbed, her hunger lessened, but only slightly. Overall, the experience had been a net negative. Curious, Nixelia targeted another fish, but this time, she wrapped her shadowy tendril around its body and crushed it. Blood and guts shot out its mouth into the water, terrifying the nearby fish. Pulling the fish out of the water and leaving it on the lake's shore, she waited. It took longer than she had hoped, but eventually, the little white orb floated free from the vessel, and Nixelia noticed it began to phase out of reality to somewhere she couldn't even see. Before it could fully go, she reached out and grabbed it. Pulling it into her own soul, she felt a tiny rush of power. It was insignificant, like savoring a single water droplet while dying of thirst. But more importantly, she hadn't felt more hungry from the process. It had been a net positive. A ray of hope bloomed in Nixelia's mind as she now understood. Ashlock told me netherworld wraiths were spiritual beings that feasted on souls and existed on a plane of reality that shouldn't exist. I expend no energy when I'm simply floating through reality without interacting with it. However, When I try to manifest my shadow tendrils in water, I use energy, and I use far more to pull souls out of people's bodies while they are alive. I see now why devouring those Nitro's elders almost made me lose it. While their souls did contain a lot of chi, I ended up expending more to forcefully pull the souls from their bodies and reduce their vessels to dust. As I killed so many at once, the sudden loss of chi caused me to almost lose control. So, the key is to expend less energy than I receive from absorbing a soul. No wonder Ashlock doesn't bother to kill the mortals in Darklight and Ashfallen City. The effort isn't worth the gain. Nixelia felt relieved to have discovered the reason and was glad she decided to seclude herself deep in the wilderness. But then, a disturbing thought occurred to her. Is that why Ashlock is turning mortals into cultivators? Raising them as cattle for slaughter? Nixelia paused and shrugged. What Ashlock does is none of my business. My job is simply to defend his livestock. Citizens. Now I have two options, Nixelia said as she floated alongside the lakeshore upon a mass of squirming shadows. Her voice was far different from how it had been as a human. It sounded ethereal, as if she were speaking from another place. I keep hunting these weak monsters in the most chi-efficient way until my body is stabilized, or I go hunting for cultivators. Her eyes snapped to the sky as she saw a Star Core Realm cultivator blitz past, propelled by an intense wind that blew the leaves off the trees they passed over with a boom. No matter how fast they traveled, in Nixelia's spiritual gaze, all she saw was their delicious soul of wind chi. Looks like the heavens have given me an answer. Nixelia phased through reality after the cultivator. It was time to hunt. Stratus's Crest's star core hummed in his chest as he burned his air chi to get as far away from Nitro City as possible. As the Grand Elder of the Azurcrest family, he had been in attendance for the summit. With the beast tide on the horizon, he had expected to be the center of attention as the one who provided and managed the airships. Stolen novel. Please report. At the demands of Vincent Nitros, he had done terrible things. He used demonic techniques such as fusing the souls of his own children to make them into nocturnes just to meet the quota. So much suffering, so much sacrifice. It had all been for today. At the summit, he was supposed to have reaped the benefits of his loyalty to the Nitros family. He had dreamed of sitting at the table as the other families paid their respects and begged him for more airships. Who in the 9 realms did Vincent offend? Stratus Azurcrest screamed in his mind as the world blurred around him. Just who was the Ashfallen sect? I'd have called anyone who claimed there was a new divine level sect mad. But they had multiple nascent soul realm monsters under their command and, whatever that thing that came down from the sky was. His mind ached just thinking of it. All he wanted to do now was fly back to his family's airship that he had left far from the city. Bringing it to Nitro City was always a pain when all the families came together as the oversized docking stations were limited, and the noble families turned it into a competition to see who could get a higher one. I'll have to gather the elders and inform them of what has happened. Stratus Azurcrest frowned. I cannot tell who is loyal to who. The Nitros family has fallen and the Blood Lotus sect is no more, that's for sure. The Ashfallen sect made it clear that they were hellbent on destroying the Nitros family and would be so kind as to incorporate us into their sect so long as we assisted with fending off the beast tide. What a bunch of lunatics. Why would they want to stay and fight the largest beast tide in history? Just get out of the way and return in a few months if the land is so precious. If they think they can use my family as disposable pawns and throw us at the beasts, they are delusional. I'm done being a slave to tyrants. Stratus Azurcrest brought out a communication jade from his spatial ring and did something he never thought he would do. Inserting some chi, he spoke into it. This is Stratus Azurcrest. As the Grand Elder of the Azurcrest family and president of the airship industry, he paused but decided this was for the best. I demand a recall of all airships to Azurcrest City. This is an absolute order, and any who disobey, well, you know what will happen. He cut his chi and pocketed the communication jade. His message would be relayed between every airship station throughout the Blood Lotus sect, and by sundown, every airship would be cruising through the sky toward Azurcrest City. While the message had been about airships, his stance was clear to anyone listening. The Azurcrest family was betraying not only the Nitros but every family in the Blood Lotus sect. This was a decision that would not be taken lightly by the other elders. It has to be done. The Blood Lotus sect is over. After recalling all the airships, I will evacuate Azurcrest City. The question is to where. Taking a piece of land that's still on the ley line but out of the way of the beast tide will be difficult. Any good spots will be highly contested. Stratus rubbed his chin in thought. What if we stayed in the air? If we used our spirit stone reserves, setting up chi-efficient formations on a few airships to keep them permanently airborne wouldn't be impossible. Expensive, sure. But the survival of my bloodline is what is important here. He would have to leave nearly every mortal behind to perish, even though they had paid for a ticket, and just take maids to tend to his needs, but that was a sacrifice he was more than willing to make. Mortals were only useful for building houses, mining spirit stones, and farming. If he only needed to keep his family alive for a few months while the beast tide passed, he could return to this area, and so long as the Ashfallen sect hadn't fully taken it over, he could get the mortal breeding and have a workforce within a decade. I can't tell if the Ashfallen sect's arrival is a blessing or a curse. I know that old man Starweaver was ranting about the descent of an evil god or something. I wasn't really taking him seriously, well, until now. There's no doubt the all-seeing eye is an evil god, but even a demon can be reasoned with. The problem was the cost. According to the strange lich-looking monster, they would be welcomed under the all-seeing eye in exchange for servitude and taking an oath. Apparently, the rewards would be worth it, but he refused to believe such words. It's fine. We can just run away and decide if it's worth it another time. Stratus thought as he saw his airship on the horizon. Perhaps he had gone a little overboard during its construction, but it was his family's pride and joy. A true symbol of their dominance over the air. The thing was a floating fortress decked out in a mountain worth of spirit stones. Silver light flickered across its dull metal exterior from the many hidden defensive formations. Even from afar, he could see dozens of hired cultivators with various affinities standing guard, but they were tiny dots compared to the floating behemoth they stood upon. Since Wen Qi lacked combat capabilities compared to many other affinities, he had to use the profits from the airship industry to hire rogue cultivators with more combat-orientated affinities, such as fire, which was still effective in the air. As he got closer, Stratus sensed something was wrong. He wasn't exactly hiding his presence, and usually, the cultivators would notice him coming and prepare to welcome him. Instead, they all had their backs to him and seemed in a panic as Qi flickered across their shoulders. What is going on? Are they on guard due to my message? A bell began to ring, signifying the airship was under attack. It thundered across the wilderness, and he saw the entire ship glow brightly as the defensive formations fully powered up. At the level of power being emitted, the defensive formations would burn through the ship's spirit stone reserves within an hour. Either the commanding elders on the ship had gone mad due to his message, or they were being attacked by a threat equal to Vincent Nitro's. What? How? Stratus spread out his spiritual sight but couldn't detect the presence of any other airships, cultivators, or monsters. Could it be the all-seeing eye? No, that shouldn't be possible. He pushed even more chi into his sword and there was a sonic boom as he broke the sound barrier and arrived beside the cultivators a moment later. Report. What is happening? Two cultivators turned to face him, and one of their expressions lit up. Grand Elder, thank the heavens you are here. It was one of his brothers. Right after you sent your message, people began to die. What do you mean die? Who and where? Stratus was growing frustrated as the bell continued to ring, and he could feel the intense pressure coming from the defensive formations. They had been designed to ward off nascent soul-level attacks but at a significant cost. I don't know, Grand Elder, the situation is still developing. Useless, Stratus pushed past his brother to get a better overview of the ship. Annoyingly, the defensive formations meant his spiritual gaze could not penetrate the walls to get a better idea of what was happening. The airship was built in a giant ring with crosswalks connecting the whole thing and suspending a command room in the center. Everything seemed in order. Nothing had been blown up or gone missing. There weren't even any signs of fighting. Stratus narrowed his eyes. Brother, who is commanding the ship right now? Elder Ventus is commanding as usual. He paused as a body was thrown through the wall of the command center, taking out one of the walkways before splatting on the side. The force of the throw caused the entire airship to briefly tilt. Never mind, he's dead. I can see that, Stratus hissed as he conjured his light gray soul flames. But deep down, he knew it was pointless. Anything that could hurl a Star Core Elder through runically enhanced metal would laugh at his attacks. The question is who? He got his answer as a squirming mass of shadows manifested out of thin air, dragging the splattered body toward the ground and vanishing among the trees. Only one being he could think of had this kind of power. The all-seeing eye is here. He cursed, much to the confusion of the cultivators around him. You people don't understand. He turned and jumped back on his sword. Abandon ship or die here. They exchanged a look of confusion. But Grand Elder, this ship is a fortress designed to handle nascent soul realm threats. Even Vincent Nitros wouldn't stand a chance at forcing us to abandon ship. Brother, Stratus narrowed his eyes, his tone deathly serious. It's that kind of arrogance that resulted in the Nitros family's downfall. This ship was designed to hold off beasts and cultivators, not a reality-bending evil god. Evil god. Brother, what are you on about? Stratus was about to answer, but the words died in his throat as a woman with translucent white eyes and a crown of dark wooden antlers manifested behind his brother. The ghostly woman, who seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, placed a hand on his brother's head, only for the hand to pass through him. She continued down until her hand reached the chest area that was known to house the soul. Brother. Stratus grimaced as the woman pulled her hand back, and the life left his brother's eyes. Moments later, his brother's body disintegrated into dust. C-384. Constellations. Ashlock stared down at the Starweaver Grand Elder with growing concern. The amount of chi radiating from the man was well past what should have been possible from a cultivator in the Star Core realm, and it was only rising. The old man blinked, and his eyes, which had been glowing a heavenly gold, were now black abysses. He continued to blink as if something was irritating his eye, and with each blink, a tiny white spot appeared in his utterly black eyes. What is going on? Ashlock wondered as the man's chi increased in intensity with the addition of every white spot. Eventually, his eyes looked like the endless night sky. A celestial wind swirled around the Starweaver Grand Elder, picking him up from his kneeling position and making him stand up tall. The man raised an accusing finger and pointed straight at Ashlock's evil eye. The heavens are aware of you and your origin scheme. He shouted, his chi-infused voice parting the clouds and making the portal. Ashlock was looking through ripple, the threads of fate demand an intervention. Wait. Ashlock thundered into his mind with abyssal whispers, what do you mean by my origin scheme? Morgan had previously mentioned that an origin had taken an interest in him, so she initially tried to form a pact with him, which he had denied. She had then accused him of being an origin. However, Ashlock suspected his system was the origin but did not know what type, and his system wasn't keen to answer his questions. Unfortunately, his question fell on deaf ears as the Starweaver Grand Elder seemed possessed by a higher power. I will now commence your eradication. The Starweaver Grand Elder declared as he clapped his two hands together, and an immense amount of chi shot into the sky. Ashlock's evil eye swiveled to look around, but nothing seemed to be happening. There were no falling stars or meteor showers. A misfire. Ashlock thought but suddenly felt an immense pull on his soul. Warning. Voidstorm Aegis was automatically triggered to block an incoming attack. Chi reserves lacking to block further incoming attacks. Requesting intervention. What in the hell? Ashlock closed the portal right in front of his evil eye and glanced up at the sky over Red Vine Peak. It was supposed to be the middle of the afternoon, yet all he could see was the vast cosmos overhead. Black lightning arced up from his Voidstorm Aegis to meet intense beams of starlight shooting down at him, and he also saw hundreds, no thousands of meteors burning through the atmosphere toward Red Vine Peak and the entire region. It looked like the end of the world. No wonder my system said I don't have the chi reserves to repel this attack. Ashlock cursed. While his chi reserves had grown tremendously since he first unlocked the S-grade defensive skill, each bolt of void lightning still took around 1% of his reserves. The skill was terrifyingly lethal and effective, but not against a wide-scale attack like this. This was the type of attack that would level cities and make nascent Soul Realm patriarchs bend their knees in awe. Unfortunately for the Starweaver Grand Elder, the foolish old man had chosen to fight with a demigod who didn't take attacks on himself lightly. So this is the wrath of the heavens, Ashlock said with abyssal whispers to the sky. Do you think I'm an insect that will be easy to crush? His inner world suspended within his vast star core began to spin faster. Spatial chi mixed with divine energy taken from his sacrificial credit trees crackled violently as his soul pressure skyrocketed. Red Vine Peak began to glow as a beacon of power across the entire region as Ashlock glared at the heavens. Let's see who will be eradicating whom. A bubble of reality warping divine empowered spatial chi rapidly expanded upwards like a shockwave toward the heavens. The moment it hit the thousands of meteors, the fire wrapping them was extinguished, and a second later, they exploded in a wave into tiny pieces that were then thrown back into the cosmos. With the meteors that would have wiped out the entire region dealt with, Ashlock needed to find a way to stop the starlight beams. They were too high intensity to block with spatial chi alone, and while they were all targeting him right now, there was no guarantee they wouldn't start targeting the surrounding cities. How is this attack even possible? It's far beyond something a Star Core realm cultivator could be capable of. Ashlock recalled the merchant Lucius, who worked with Nox and gave his body and soul to the sun god to unlock far more power. The Starweaver Grand Elder's actions before unleashing this attack had seemed in line with what Lucius had done. The heavens must be using the Starweaver Grand Elder as a proxy to try and smite me down. It was well known that the heavens couldn't unleash their full power on lower layers of creation. Ashlock reopened a portal to Nitro City and looked down at the Starweaver Grand Elder with his evil eye. Sure enough, the man's soul was breaking apart under the strain. The heavens were using him as a disposable pawn to try and kill him. Chaos, kill him, Ashlock commanded his Reaper. Not even a second after his command, a four-armed headless ent emerged from the void and skewered the Starweaver Grand Elder with over a dozen claws. The man's night sky eyes widened, and he gasped in pain. It was sad to see such a powerful cultivator being controlled by the heavens, but that was the outcome for those who listened to the threads of fate. They were lies spun by the heavens, not a future to live by. You. The Starweaver Grand Elder wheezed before coughing up a mouthful of blood. This was always your fate, Ashlock told the dying man, from the moment you stated that I was an evil god and we would become enemies after dealing with the beast tide. I've simply moved up the timeline. Under you, there is only darkness on the horizon. The man's body slumped forward, the life leaving his eyes. Devourer of worlds, I curse you, sin of gluttony. Is that what the heavens are calling me? The Grand Elder spat on the ground with a disgusted grin. I'll never answer the likes of you. All right, Ashlock said, I will see you again very soon. I hope to never see you, Aga. Chaos silenced the Starweaver Grand Elder by tearing him apart. What was left of the old man plopped down in a bloodied mess with Chaos standing over him. What you hope doesn't matter to me. Sin of gluttony. What a joke. Ashlock mused as an ethereal root cracked from the ground and loomed over the corpse. Chaos poked a tiny hole with her claw into his root, and a single drop of cursed blood fell onto the Starweaver Grand Elder's body. If the heavens are already aware of my existence and the threads of fate call for my eradication, I will take control of everything I can to survive. Starting with making a cosmic chi bastion. Ents were good, but they couldn't grow in power. Already, his Ents were starting to fall behind him in power, except for Anubis and his Void Ents, simply because Void affinity was so strong. Meanwhile, bastions could grow in cultivation, and he could use Progeny Dominion S on them, turning bastions into an extension of himself. Bastion cores were also linked directly to Ashlock's soul and chi reserves, allowing his bastions to make use of his vast chi pool, which would be perfect for a chi-intensive affinity like Cosmic. A case of literary theft. This tale is not rightfully on Amazon. If you see it, report the violation. The Starweaver Grand Elder was nearing the peak of the Star Core realm, so he would make a strong bastion, and Ashlock had seen the highly destructive potential of cosmic affinity during Celeste's fight. The cursed blood spread throughout the two halves of his body, and moments later, black wood spiraled upwards, and the two joined into one. Branches sprouted out at unnatural angles as if reaching for distant stars. Translucent leaves bloomed with veins of celestial energy that, when looking from below, reflected a map of constellations. When Ashlock thought the process was complete, the roots around the tree thinned into threads that radiated divine energy and began spreading out. I don't know what your name was before this, but you will be known as Orion from now on, Ashlock declared. It was a fitting name of Greek origin, meaning heaven's lights and the name of a constellation. Power surged through the tree, making it glow with an ethereal light. Now, system. Do you wish to activate the Skyborn Bastion? The cost is 1,000 sacrificial credits and the required materials to form a bastion core. How did you? Oh yeah, you can read my mind. Yes, turn him into one. Ashlock paid the 1,000 credits and began the process. Forming bastion core. The castle's courtyard, now covered in rubble and signs of battle, began to tremble as waves of power rippled out. Bastion's chi source has been designated as Ashlock. Bastion's operator has been designated as Orion. Since Orion was already in the Star Core realm, forcing a tribulation was unnecessary. Bastion's affinity type set to meteorite cosmic. Below the courtyard, a shard of black and silver meteorite with intricate carvings formed and linked up with his ethereal roots, giving him the feeling of absolute control. Skyborn Bastion active. Ashlock paid some extra credits to increase the size of the bastion to encompass the entire courtyard, including the stone statues of Vincent Nitros. I wonder if I should keep them, as the idea of Vincent fighting a flying island with his own statues on it sounds quite amusing. Ashlock pondered but eventually gave up and decided to figure it out later. For now, he would leave Orion here. He needed to go after Nixelia and inform others about the state of things. Immense inflow of divine energy detected. Huh, what for? Ashlock thought back on what had happened and then felt dumb. He had just been defending himself, but he realized his display of defiance against the heavens had been in full view of everyone in Ashfallen and Darklight City. Ashlock looked inside his inner world, and while on the way to watch his forest of sacrificial credits grow, he passed the floating arena and realized the tournament was still going on inside his inner world. It had been put on a brief hold, but there were still many cultivators inside his inner world that had no doubt seen the inside of his soul as he repelled heaven's wrath. System. How many credits do I have? Idletree daily sign in system. Day. 3643. Daily credit. 0. Sacrifice credit. 822. Sign in. Decent. I'm sure it's about to go a lot higher than that once all the divine energy has been harvested. Ashlock moved away from the floating arena toward Stella's house. He knew she was worried as he hadn't had time to explain. Stella sat on the couch in her house, twiddling her thumbs. An oppressive mood blanketed the room as she stole glances at the others sitting around the house's biggest table in silence. It had been an hour since Ash had hurriedly told her to take everyone into his inner world. They had already exhausted their list of theories and concerns regarding the outcome of the battle in Nitro City. We are going to be fine, right? Elaine asked in a small voice that everyone heard. She was the most on edge, as there had been no sign of Morrigan. All they had experienced was having their void shields popped in various ways and teleporting back to Quill's library. Trust in Ashlock, Douglas said, softly rubbing Elaine's back with a kind smile. When has he ever let us down? But Elaine trailed off, but everyone knew what she wanted to say. Vincent Nitros is nearing the monarch realm. Stella closed her eyes and leaned back as she felt an ache in her stomach from the nerves. Every passing second felt like an agonizing hour. Ash is strong, but there's no guarantee he can deal with such a powerhouse. A sudden wave of power washed over the entire house, making Stella's eyes snap open. She stood up, as did everyone else, and they scrambled toward the windows. What is happening? The Redclaw Grand Elder said, glancing at Stella. How would I know? Stella replied in a panic as she stared up at Ash's turbulent soul that made up the sky. It seemed an immense amount of chi was being diverted somewhere, and divine energy was also being used. Whatever Ash was fighting, he was going all out. We have to go help him, Stella's star core hummed in her chest. She was about to step through the ether when she felt a firm grasp on her shoulder, rooting her in place. Where do you think you're going? Stella glared over her shoulder at Diana. Why are you stopping me? Diana cocked a brow. Are you suicidal now? If Ashlock has to exert this much effort to kill something, it is way out of your league. Stella ground her teeth. Am I wrong? No, Stella said through clenched teeth as she shrugged Diana's hand off her shoulder but didn't make any moves to leave. Diana was right. If she was to go out there, she would only be a hindrance. It's just frustrating. I want to be useful, but I know. Diana ruffled her hair, but it's not our fault Ashlock can grow in cultivation so fast. We can only do our best to keep up and be useful when the time calls for it. Diana is right. Douglas sighed while not taking his eyes off staring out the window. Whatever this is, it ain't our fight. Sometimes, it's best to sit back and let the godly beings fight it out. Besides, it's not like the fight is here on Red Vine Peak, Diana added. I bet he's beating the shit out of Vincent through one of his offspring or bastions. Stella slowly nodded, only half convinced. Somehow, she felt the fight was much closer than they expected, but even then, what would she do as a measly star core realm cultivator? If Ash, who had a literal planet inside his own soul, had to go all out, she would just get in the way. I need to get stronger. Otherwise, I will just be a burden to Tree moving forward. Stella stepped away from the window and sat back on the couch. Her spatial ring flashed with silver light, and the books on Ether Affinity Valandor had given her appeared in her hands. Flipping to the first page, she began to read while the rest continued watching the awe-inspiring display of power outside the window. A few confusing minutes later, Stella felt Ash's presence breathing down her neck, followed by his voice. Whatcha reading? Tree. Stella had never felt so relieved. She had been using this hard-to-read cultivation manual to distract her wandering thoughts, but she had begun to fear the worst. Everyone turned at her shouting, and soon came a wave of questions toward the ceiling. Okay. Everyone relax. One at a time. Is Vincent Nitro's dead? The Redclaw Grand Elder asked the burning question. No, Ash replied. He ran away, leaving a giant illusion formation to cover his escape. Though it's not all bad. Used Elysia to turn the whole thing into an opportunity to incorporate Nitro's city into our cult. Stella felt her stomach sink. The man who wanted to hunt her down and was powerful enough to threaten Ash was still out there. But she also couldn't believe Ash managed to turn that situation into one that benefited him. Sorry to ask, but do you know what happened to Morrigan? Elaine asked with hope in her eyes. Oh, Morrigan. She's doing just fine. Ashlock replied with some sourness in his tone. Not sure where she ran off to, but that old fox can take care of herself. I see, that's good. Elaine breathed out a sigh of relief and leaned into Douglas. Ashlock, I have a question. What was that earlier? Diana asked while pointing outside. We saw you using a lot of chi and even divine energy to fight something. Oh, that. Ashlock laughed. Nothing too serious, just some old fool colluding with the heavens to try and kill me. Who was this old fool? Stella said, her eyes narrowing. Was it someone she could go and hunt? The Starweaver Grand Elder, but you don't need to worry about him. I already turned him into a tree. Actually, you can come and see for yourself. A portal rippled into existence, showing a truly breathtaking tree in the middle of a destroyed courtyard backdropped by a destroyed castle that looked very different from the one they had seen earlier. Just make sure to wear your artifact, Stella. We don't want Vincent sniffing your bloodline's location just yet, at least not until we have a suitable trap set up for him. You think he will come? Diana asked. He is one paranoid bastard and is bound to sniff out a trap from miles away. I don't think he will come. Ashlock paused. I know he will. We have something he can't live without. The question isn't if he will strike, it's when. Chapter 385. Discerning one's nature. Stella's foot paused before the portal with a bone-chilling fear gripping her heart. Even with the Phantom Veil amulet hanging from her neck, masking her cultivation and bloodline, making her appear as nothing but immortal, she still couldn't take the next step. Taking a step back, Stella gulped before looking to the ceiling, where she could feel Ash's presence. Tree, how can you be so sure that Vincent isn't lurking in Nitro City? Stella asked, making everyone else pause at her side. The portal seemed to lead to an inviting scene, with a majestic tree's leaves softly rustling in a wind they could not yet feel. However, there was still a sense of danger. None of them had eaten a void protection fruit, and they also hadn't set up spatial anchors to pull them back if something terrible happened. Only Stella had set up a secondary anchor that triggered if she lost a body part. There are no guarantees in life, Ash answered honestly, but I can say with near certainty that Vincent will not be there, nor will he return to Nitro City. Stella let out a long breath to try and calm her inner turmoil. While she trusted Tree unquestionably, her body refused to comply. It was as if her legs were convinced that if they took a step through the portal, it would be the end of her and everyone she had come to care about. This wasn't just her fight. It involved everyone else as well. Vincent is quite similar to me, you see. Ash continued. Stella scowled. He's nothing like you. How could you even compare yourself to that monster? Oh, but he is. Ash said casually. We are both rulers who gain power from those under us. He founded the Blood Lotus sect as a breeding ground for bloodlines and a place to safely cultivate by growing a family to protect him and controlling those around him to be absolutely loyal. Ash paused. Meanwhile, I founded the Ashfallen sect to raise cultivators to protect me and created the cult of the all-seeing eye because I gain power from believers. Those who refuse to comply with me are forced to take oaths of loyalty, secrecy or service me in death as ents, trees, or are outright devoured to further my cultivation. But you are different. Stella retorted. You care about us, the sect. Vincent is a monster who only cares about himself. You are right, Stella. Ash agreed. That's why I said Vincent and I are very similar, not the exact same. While our methods and goals differ slightly, I believe I can predict Vincent's next move by thinking what I would do in his situation. Is that how you know Vincent isn't in Nitro City and has no plans to return? Diana asked. Yes. While I care about nurturing and protecting those around me, Vincent is the total opposite. He sees everyone as pawns to be used to satisfy his goals. We can see this aspect of his character through the way he happily abandoned his family members and watched from afar as his guardians were devoured. That is why he won't return to Nitro City. It has expended its purpose, and he has no lingering attachments to this place. The castle that had served as a stronghold is gone, his family is either dead or fleeing, and he has no use for the mortal population. Stella felt disgusted at the idea of abandoning one's home so easily. To her, Red Vine Peak was her everything. She had grown up there, laughed and cried there, and, more importantly, made friends and family there. How could Vincent abandon his home so easily? Patriarch, where do you think he is going next? The Redclaw Grand Elder asked. There is only one place he has to go, Ash replied. To me, well, more specifically, Stella. The last place Stella went without wearing her artifact was Red Vine Peak, so that is where he will go. It might not be today, tomorrow, next week, or even this year. But one day, he will go where Stella is to get her bloodline. From Valendor, we know Vincent can smell bloodlines at vast ranges, so we can effectively lead him by the nose to wherever we want. That is how we will kill him. How can you be sure he is after Stella's bloodline? Elaine asked, and everyone in the room glanced at her. Because Vincent is a slave to his own nature. Bloodlines give him power, but they also control his actions, and you should know this better than most, Elaine. Knowledge is power. As if to reinforce his point, Ash took the ether technique manuals out of Stella's hands with telekinesis and had them floating in the air, flicking through the pages. We can see his obsession with getting information by focusing on obtaining the Starweaver bloodline that lets one peer into the threads of fate. Stella's bloodline is not only likely one of the greatest bloodlines to emerge out of the Blood Lotus sect, but it's also one that would give him access to a vast amount of knowledge not only about cultivation but also about the many bloodlines out there in higher realms and who to obtain them from. Vincent is close to the peak of what this layer of creation can offer him and is likely starving for ways to progress. Stella's bloodline is likely the key, and he knows that. Stella was rather impressed with Ash's analysis of Vincent, and somehow, laying out his personality and goals like this helped calm her down. It turned this all-powerful Grim Reaper in her mind into just another person. A powerful person for sure, but not an undefeatable phantom. The Grand Elder hummed in thought before asking, so you don't believe he will visit other families like the Azurcrest or Terraforge families still loyal to him? That, I'm not sure. Ash hummed in thought, let's think. We all know affinities often shape a person's personality as they grow their soul with the chi of their affinity, right? Earth cultivators are usually more hard-headed and down for a fistfight, while fire cultivators are usually more short-tempered. From this, we can infer that Vincent is obsessed with control. His affinities are blood, gravity, and his last one is shadow or, more likely, illusion. What do all of these have in common? An aspect of control over one's body, mind, or surroundings. Ash paused. My point is, he discovered today that he has lost control over many of the families in the Blood Lotus sect. The question is if that challenges his pride on a deeper level, and he feels compelled to re-establish control. If it does, he will likely visit the noble families first and try to regain control over them and possibly the families that fell out of favor with him. I don't think he will bother to visit the other families, Stella said without thinking. Oh, Diana raised a brow. Why not? Because he's arrogant. Stella shrugged. Perhaps it was because she was also self-admittedly too prideful sometimes. She felt like she also understood Vincent on a deeper level now that Ash had laid out his personality for her. As Ash has already pointed out, in Vincent's eyes, everyone in the sect is a pawn. They aren't allies to lean on or people worth keeping around once they become a hindrance. Imagine you are a cultivator nearing the monarch realm. What use would a bunch of Star Core realm elders be to you? Remember, Vincent founded this sect to breed bloodlines. He has never cared about the families that make up the sect. If he did, he would have cared more when entire families like the Winterwrath and Evergreens were wiped out. That's true. Diana nodded. So, in conclusion, Vincent is likely to abandon all ties to Nitro City and the Blood Lotus sect and will someday come after Stella's scent as he desires her bloodline. That's my assumption, yes. Stella frowned. There's just one part one don't understand. How are we going to kill him? So far, he has evaded our capture and likes to use clones instead of ever putting himself in danger. Ah, that won't be so hard. Our favorite shadow tree saw quite the upgrade today, Ashlock chuckled. Once Nixelia gets control of her body, she will be able to handle Vincent like a toy. Nixelia. Stella didn't know who that was. It's the name I gave Nox's new form. She is a Netherwood wraith, a mythical being that feasts on souls. The problem is the body I transplanted her soul into surpasses the monarch realm, so she is lacking control over the body's ravenous hunger for souls. If you come across this story on Amazon, it's taken without permission from the author. Report it. Diana rubbed her temples. How did you even? You know what, never mind. Where is Nixelia now? That, I'm not sure. She can effortlessly phase through reality, making her impossible to track. She devoured the souls of a few Nitro's elders and then vanished. Diana sighed. So the person we need to defeat Vincent is currently off somewhere devouring souls. Very likely. Yes. Ash paused, but she should be back soon, maybe. Stella exchanged a knowing glance with everyone, and Diana rolled her eyes. I'm sure it will be fine, Stella said, stepping through the portal. She tensed up for a moment as the smell of rubble and destruction tickled her nose. A distant bell was also ringing, and she could feel the cold aura from the celestial tree before her. But she relaxed. Vincent didn't appear out of nowhere and kill her. Ash hadn't been wrong. Her hand, which had unknowingly tightly clutched the phantom veil amulet around her neck, fell to her side. The portal behind her rippled as the others stepped through, looking around. Curiously, Stella could feel their spiritual presence spreading out to scope out the area. She did the same and was surprised at how much mystic chi was drenching the city. Elysia must have gone all out. Stella thought as her spiritual presence encompassed the entire courtyard, what was left of the castle and surrounding streets. Just how powerful has that crazy girl gotten? I hope she liked Ash's seed, which I gave her as a present. Where are the rest of the Nitro's family? Diana asked. Dead, Ash replied coldly. Larry just devoured the remaining few. Of course, there's a chance a few escaped during the chaos, but we got most of them. Stella glanced down the central street and saw a shifting mass of silver ash heading straight for her. It surged up the steps to the courtyard and paused before her before condensing into the vague shape of a spider. Princess, I'm glad to see you are all right, Larry said. Stella smiled and fluently responded in kind with the runic language. You have grown since I last saw you, Larry. Master gave me the honor of reducing these vermin that have plagued you since young to ash, princess. The divine spider bowed his head. I will now return to Master to evolve into a form that will be able to better protect you in the future. Stella patted Larry's head, but her hand went through the ash. I'll look forward to it. But make sure to take your time, okay? Maple will look after me in the meantime. The lazy squirrel that had been hanging around Quill and had hopped onto her head at some point rolled over at the mention of his name but didn't so much as open an eyelid. Larry's many eyes glared at Maple. That squirrel is a fickle one. I would be careful about putting your life in his hands. Stella reached up and gently rubbed Maple's head, which earned a satisfied cry out of the world-devouring eldritch horror. He may be lazy, but he does act when it counts. If the princess says so then it must be true, Larry said, earning an amused smirk from Stella. Go on, don't let me keep you. Stella gestured to the portal, which was still open behind them, to her house. Larry obliged by strangely walking through the air and phasing through the rift. With the Ashfallen sect's guardian gone, Stella coughed as the runic language was a bit rough on human vocal cords before turning her attention to the others. They were all crowded around the tree lording over the destroyed courtyard. Stella came to stand beside Diana, who was squinting at the leaves. What you looking at? Stella asked. The leaves were breathtakingly beautiful, and the blue sky served as a backdrop to the translucent leaves, with a tapestry of celestial energy running through them. I'm not so sure. Diana mused as she pointed at the leaves above, the patterns within the leaves. Do you notice them changing ever so slightly? Stella watched for a while and slowly nodded. Yeah, I think so. Especially the ones around here. Are they supposed to mean something? Diana crossed her arms in thought before looking to the sky. Ashlock, you said this tree was made from the Starweaver Grand Elder. She stepped back and glanced around at the roots that looked like golden threads sprawling out through the courtyard. Are these the threads of fate? Huh. Now that you point it out. Maybe they are. Ash said. Can you discern anything from the changing leaves? Diana shook her head. All I can see is them changing, not what they mean. Maybe if we got Celeste to take a look at it, she could tell us what it means since she has the bloodline. One problem with that is how will I explain the tree's origin? I can't admit it's their father now, can I? Diana had a look of realization. That's true. We can figure this out later. 4. Now, can you guys clean up this place and assist the cult in convincing the populace to accept me as their new god? Douglas froze up. By clean up, do you mean? Yes. The castle needs to be rebuilt. It serves as a focal point of authority here in Nitro City, and we need the people to know they have a new, hopefully nicer ruler. You can get the help of the Mudcloaks if you need. Just ensure the courtyard can freely detach from the castle, as I made Orion here into a bastion. Douglas sighed. Is there a time limit? No. But could you get it done by tomorrow? Douglas cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders. By tomorrow? Sure, why not? One grand castle coming right up. Stella, could you assist me? Huh. Stella raised a brow. Sure, but what for? I bet this monstrosity is decked out to the brim with defensive formations. Douglas pointed to the melted castle with his thumb. you're likely the only cookie smart enough to know anything about them. Stella smiled at the praise and joined Douglas in walking over to the castle, leaving the others around Orion. They walked in silence for a while until Douglas mumbled under his breath, "Things are really starting to get crazy, aren't they?" "What do you mean?" Stella asked while continuing to give Maple head rubs and dodging random pieces of rubble. "I don't know. I guess I'm just feeling sentimental." Douglas chuckled nervously and rubbed the back of his neck. "It's just that I remember when we were a ragtag group struggling to survive on Red Vine Peak a few months ago. But now," he trailed off as they walked through the castle's cracked grand entrance, "we are conquering distant cities in a single day, and not just any city, mind you. This is Nitro City, the capital of the Blood Lotus sect, and here I am, casually walking through their castle, which was half-eaten by heaven knows what." "So?" Stella asked as she ran her finger along a section of wall that had a part of a formation exposed. "We are a big fish in a small pond. Senior Lee could come down and end us with a mere thought. The beast tide on the horizon may still wipe out all of us, and if Vincent tried his absolute best to kill me, I'm sure he would succeed. Hell, we are on the 9th layer of creation. Who knows what powerhouses are still above us?" Douglas let out a long breath of resignation. "I suppose you're right. It's just quite the adjustment from my decades as a street rat and fighting for fucking gangs in slums." "You're really unfazed by all this." Stella shrugged. "Maybe it will all hit me when I see Vincent dead at my feet, but in my mind, the threats that have loomed over my head since my childhood are still ever present despite our leap in power. Instead of being far away and unbeatable, they are now very much in my face while still feeling threatening despite my growth in cultivation." Stella put a hand on the stone and looked up at the vaulted ceiling. "It's frustrating, to say the least. I just want to live in peace with Ash." She looked over her shoulder and met Douglas's eyes. "Is that so much to ask?" "No, it's not." Douglas shook his head. "Unfortunately, we live in a rather cruel world that doesn't give a rat's ass about our dreams." "Exactly. So stop thinking so much. We have indeed come far in a short amount of time, but in the grand scheme of things, we are still a frog trapped in a well." Douglas snorted. "Where did you learn an old phrase like that?" "I pick things up here and there from books I have acquired from various places." Stella returned her focus to the runic formation. "Now, as for this runic formation, it's a little too complex for my current understanding." She followed the trail of silver up a nearby pillar. "I think the formation spreads throughout the entire castle, though, which means you either need to rebuild the entire castle with the runic formation or simply tear it all out. It also seems like the formation was powered beyond its intended capability as most of the runic circuitry is dulled and will need replacing." Douglas rubbed his chin. "How long do you think it would take you to analyze and rebuild the formation?" "Quite a while. Days possibly." Stella sighed and stepped away. "But that's assuming there's enough intact formation buried in all this stone to rebuild the entire thing. If a vital section has been destroyed, then I'll have to improvise, and at that point, it's better to start from scratch with a formation of our own." Douglas finished what she was going to say. "All right, I'm on a time limit to build something worthy of Ashlock, so I'll have the Mudcloaks tear it all out." "Hold on, I have a better idea." Stella opened a rift to the ether. "Come on out, Guppy, I have a meal for you." "Who's Guppy?" Douglas eyed the tear in reality with confusion. "My adorable pet." Stella grinned as a shadow moved toward the rift entrance, followed by a clicking noise. Guppy poked his head through a moment later, earning a string of curses from Douglas as the man stumbled back. "Pet? You call that abomination a pet?" Stella pouted as she rubbed Guppy's snout. "Douglas, you're being rude." Sorry." Douglas grimaced. "What is it?" "A dark-tide devourer. They are known to devour islands and grow in power by eating spirit stones." Guppy stopped drooling. Stella gently smacked the monster, and it let off a soft cry. "Unbelievable." Douglas pinched the bridge of his nose. "Sometimes I forget just how screwed in the head. You know what, never mind. Let's get this show on the road." He reached up to his crude stone crown. "Could you open a portal to Red Vine Peak? It's about darn time for the Mudcloaks to assemble." C-386. Mudcloak's secret. Ashlock's focus returned to Red Vine Peak to open a portal for the Mudcloaks, as Stella couldn't open such a long-range portal herself. "Come to think of it, I haven't checked on them in quite a while," Ashlock mused as his spiritual gaze floated through the rain and roaring wind toward the citadel. "I wonder what they have been up to." Atop the monolith that served as the central core of the citadel was Quill's library, and Ashlock could see his offspring's leaves fighting with the storm. The citadel was an 8,000-meter deep hole through the center of the mountain that had been made by a giant star core realm worm. While the roaring wind quietened down the deeper he delved, the citadel had been turned into a waterfall as rain drummed on the spiral staircase and cascaded down into the depths. If I remember correctly, there's a small lake at the bottom that is fed by my ethereal roots alongside the troughs built into the central pillar that feed the moss that the mudcloaks like to eat. Ashlock thought as he reached the bottom, ah yeah, there it is. He was pretty surprised as he inspected the small lake. It wasn't overflowing like he had anticipated. Wait, are those pipes? Looking closer, he saw industrial-sized pipes built into the lake's side, and he could see the water rapidly flowing into them. Were these always here? I don't think so. Deciding to follow them, as he hadn't seen any mudcloaks daring to brave the rain thus far, he soon came upon a vast tunnel. He would have thought it was a giant cave system if not for the perfectly smooth walls. It was as if it had been dug out by a machine. It didn't take long for him to run into his first mudcloaks. There was a small group inspecting a crack in the wall. All of them were wearing bright yellow rain boots and matching metal helmets. One of them was holding a clipboard and seemed to be the group leader as they waved a runic device over the crack. It looked like a long stick letting off a blue light, but when the mudcloak waved it over the crack, it turned red. Bugs, the mudcloak declared, causing excitement from the other mudcloaks. The leader handed his clipboard and device to another and, to Ashlock's surprise, took out what he assumed to be a weapon. It was comically large compared to the 3-foot-tall mudcloak. It vaguely resembled a gun with a long nozzle and was covered in runic circuits. Ashlock took a closer look and saw words related to fire. From within his tattered black cloak, which Ashlock knew now was actually their skin and served as a protective layer, the leader mudcloak revealed his hand and placed it on the wall. Earth's soul flames flared to life, and a fist-sized hole in the rock appeared. This mudcloak is in the Star Core realm. Ashlock triple-checked, but there was no doubt about it. The leading mudcloak was in the early stages of the Star Core realm. Wait, this little guy is technically as strong as Douglas. What? The sound of clicking came from beyond the wall, and Ashlock could see something shifting in the darkness through the hole. His surprise at the mudcloaks reaching the Star Core realm was briefly put aside as his curiosity at what they were doing got the better of him. Are there really bugs in the walls? I've never noticed them. The leader stepped back and slotted the nozzle of his weapon into the suitably sized hole. The runes covering the weapon flared to life all at once, and the mudcloak laughed manically as fire blasted into the hole, causing the insects on the other side to let off a shrill cry followed by the sound of their bodies exploding like party poppers. Ashlock watched the whole scene in disbelief. Once the runic weapon finally ran out of power as all the spirit stones had dulled, the leader pulled the nozzle out of the hole, and the other mudcloaks moved in, soul flames wreathing their bodies. They created a mudcloak-sized doorway into the stone and gleefully dragged charred bug corpses into the tunnel. It was almost impossible to tell what the bug had once looked like as now it closely resembled a vaguely insect-shaped piece of coal. Yummy. One of the mudcloaks cheered with glee as they brutally tore off pieces of charred flesh and devoured it. Ashlock couldn't even see their mouths, just their glowing blue eyes that narrowed in ecstasy. The bugs were easily twice the size of a single mudcloak, yet that didn't seem to faze the mudcloaks at all as they each consumed an entire bug by themselves. Having finished their meal, the leader sealed up the hole and crack in the tunnel before leading his small entourage of yellow hat and boot-wearing mudcloaks down the tunnel. Ashlock absent-mindedly followed them with more questions than answers. When did they reach the Star Core realm? How did they make a flamethrower? What the hell are those bugs, and are their stomachs linked to a spatial dimension? He would ask them directly, but his abyssal whispers skill would undoubtedly break their minds. Since they were quite slow due to their short legs, Ashlock went on ahead down the tunnel, and in the distance, he could hear the loud clanging noise of metal striking metal. What in the 9 realms is this? Ashlock uttered in awe as the tunnel opened into an expansive space. He finally uncovered the source of the clanging as he saw hundreds of mudcloaks working on assembly lines, creating weapons and what looked like parts. Instead of conveyor belts, they had aqueducts, and the finished parts were carried along on floating pieces of wood. Ashlock finally figured out what they were using all the water for. Not only was it used to transport things around, but it was also used in the forging process to quench the metal and in cooling towers to stop the room from overheating. While they seemed to mostly focus on weapons and smaller parts, there was a giant forge in the corner that dominated the room, operated by mudcloaks using suits of shifting earth. The door to the forge was slowly opened, and a large sheet of still red-hot metal that looked like armor for a tank was pulled out. The largest of the suits of earth, 5 meters tall and operated by multiple mudcloaks, moved across the room toward the forge. Mudcloaks, all wearing the yellow helmets, streamed around its feet as they went about their own tasks. The Titan of Earth waited until the metal cooled before lugging it down a tunnel that seemed to lead to a neighboring room. Did Douglas tell them to do all this? Ashlock's opinion of the man skyrocketed. He was a diligent worker, and while dealing with his requests, he also micromanaged such a wide-scale production from the Mudcloaks. He had come here to open a portal for them but was far too curious about what else they had been doing down here. Following the Earth Titan down the tunnel, Ashlock was stunned further. If that last space was large, this one was massive. And primarily dominated by a half-complete construction that vaguely looked like a spaceship Ashlock used to see in those sci-fi shows designed to house colonies as they explored the stars. The Earth Titan that had seemed domineering in the last room as it lumbered past the endless rows of Mudcloaks working looked tiny compared to this construction. This story has been unlawfully obtained without the author's consent. Report any appearances on Amazon. Beside the spaceship, piled up at the side of the room were what looked like missiles and giant suits of armor made from metal and runes. Are the Mudcloaks trying to build their own bastion? I have to say, it looks very impressive. I can see they have attached multiple of those guns that Jeb had been outfitted with that almost one-shot the Lunarshade Grand Elder. Just what is this ship going to be used for? He would have assumed the Beast Tide, but the ship looked months from completion, and the Beast Tide was already upon them. I also wonder how they plan to power this thing. Wait, how are they funding the construction? Even in this world, building a spaceship isn't free. This amount of metal had to be sourced from elsewhere, and the amount of spirit stones needed for the runic circuits in those guns alone is astronomical. Ashlock returned to the other room. Are they making money from selling these weapons? They seem mostly human-sized, so they can't use them. Ashlock suddenly felt uncomfortable when every Mudcloak paused and looked at the ceiling. The king calls. A Mudcloak called out, and chaos ensued. Every Mudcloak abandoned their post and ran around in confused circles, chanting, "King, King, King." Douglas must have called for them through his crown. Ashlock mobilized his spatial chi and tore open a portal in the middle of the room that led to Douglas. Mudcloaks streamed toward the portal while gleefully wielding various tools. Ashlock had to widen the portal as the Earth Titans they were controlling also lumbered toward the portal to honor their king's call. Ashlock returned to Nitro City and waited while Douglas barked orders to the Mudcloaks and passed out some hastily drawn designs to the leader Mudcloaks that could almost string complete sentences together. Douglas, can I talk to you for a moment? Ashlock asked when he saw Douglas had a moment to catch his breath. Of course, boss, how can I help? Douglas said while leaning against a destroyed pillar that trembled as the Mudcloaks got to work tearing down the entire castle. Did you tell the Mudcloaks to do all those things they are doing back at the Citadel? What do you mean? Douglas raised a brow. I saw them mass-producing human-sized weapons. Oh, Douglas rubbed his chin. They asked how they could make money, and I suggested they make things since they seemed quite skilled with their hands. Who are they selling these weapons to? Douglas shrugged. If I had to guess, there has been a spike in demand for weapons since the Ashfallen sect turned thousands of people into cultivators. Is there really that big of a demand? Ashlock wasn't convinced. The level of production they had going was too much, and many of the weapons seemed runically engraved, meaning they would be too expensive for most of the mortals in Darklight and Ashfallen City. It's just a few crappy swords, it's not a big deal, Douglas said dismissively. Right. Ashlock realized he was talking to a man who could build a city in a day. He was way too humble to admit the swords were quite good, considering they were being mass-produced. Sure, he had seen far better craftsmanship, but the sheer scale of production had still been impressive. What about the giant construction with the cannons? Cannons? Douglas asked with confusion. Yeah, it looked like a half-built ship. A light bulb seemed to appear over Douglas's head. Ah. They complained to me that Jeb was too weak, and they wanted to improve him. If it uses the same cannons as the one they built into Jeb, maybe it's for that. Ashlock thought back to the half-built spaceship, and he could kinda see the vision, assuming they were planning to make Jeb fly or something. Is there anything else you wanted to ask? Oi. Douglas glared off to the side and shouted, Stella. Your pet is trying to eat a Mudcloak. Guppy. You glutton. Don't eat the little guys, they aren't food. A distant voice he knew was Stella's shouted, and the abomination let out a sad cry as it put the confused Mudcloak down and got back to devouring the dulled runic formations. Ashlock decided to leave everyone to it and withdrew his presence to his inner world as he knew a pressing matter needed attention. Looming over Stella's house, a shifting mass of divine ash was patiently waiting for him. The moment he laid eyes on his guardian, the system informed him of something he had been eagerly anticipating. Larry has accumulated enough chi to evolve to SS grade. Herald of the Divine Ash, Larry, wishes to evolve. Yes, no. Yes, Ashlock answered and was surprised when the system didn't present him with a list of options to choose from. There was only one. Harbinger of the Eternal Ash, SS. As an SS grade being, he steps into the realm of kings, the monarch realm. This evolution into the Harbinger of the Eternal Ash marks his ascension into a higher form of divinity, with full dominion over decay, ash, and rebirth. Now wielding the immense potential of a domain, Larry will become an undying apocalyptic power. Please note, this evolution will take longer than previous ones as Larry must comprehend multiple laws and form an inner world. Do you still wish to proceed? That's concerning. Larry is one of the best counters I have to Vincent Nitros, and the first stages of the Beast Tide are quickly approaching. It won't take more than a week, will it? The process has no set time frame. It entirely depends on Larry's comprehension speed, but I would guess a week at minimum. What do you think, Larry? Should I start it now, or should we hold off on your evolution? Master, I beseech you to allow me to evolve. Larry lowered his head. In my current state, I am not worthy of being called the guardian of the Ashfallen sect. Not worthy. Ashlock chuckled. If not you, then who? You are one of the strongest in the sect. Nixelia has surpassed me. Maple's strength is unknown, and I suspect Mistress Elysia will be able to wield the power of a god soon enough. Please, Master, allow me to undergo this ascension so I will not be cast aside. Larry. Ashlock sighed. This darn spider already had higher cultivation than him and would be a step into the monarch realm after this evolution. If Larry was feeling inadequate, how was he supposed to feel? Everyone around him treated him like this godly figure despite a few in his sect being in a higher stage of cultivation than him. That aside, now really was a bad time to undergo an evolution that would last an undetermined amount of time. With Larry busy evolving and Nixelia off somewhere else, he was left with few trump cards. Vincent Nitros had proved that nascent soul realm ents were a joke before him, and it was said that this beast tide would have multiple nascent soul realm monsters and possibly even a monarch realm one. So, relying on Anubis was ill-advised, and Nox was trapped in a pocket realm. Leaving myself and Maple as the powerhouses in the sect, Ashlock didn't like that his partner in crime would be a very unreliable squirrel. System, could you tell me more about this evolution? I understand the jump in cultivation to the monarch realm level is significant, as is the formation of an inner world and learning multiple laws, but can you give a little more? Because as it is right now, Larry's strength serves my current needs. A lot of Larry's strength after the evolution will be based on how he can wield his new power level and capabilities. However, with the creation of an inner world, Larry will have a place where he can store ash beside his body, effectively making him utterly immortal as he can keep reforming his body. He could also unleash this stored ash upon the battlefield in a storm that corrodes anything it touches into ash that Larry can absorb into his inner world or control. That does sound quite strong. What do you mean when you say control? Since he will have laws over decay, ash, and rebirth, what can he do with the ash besides unleashing it in a storm to decay everything? He will be capable of commanding an army of ash-based warriors and creatures that fight alongside him. He can also impart his will to these creations, giving them intelligence. They will also be able to reform indefinitely from ash, making them incredibly resilient unless completely obliterated. Oh, I can see why you said he will become an undying apocalyptic power. That does sound quite useful for fighting against the beast tide. Ashlock paused as he looked at his servant, who hadn't yet raised his head. This is really bad timing, but it's hard to say no. Better to start the process now before the worst part of the beast tide hits, and I realize I need another member of my sect to be in the monarch realm. I can't yet depend on Nixelia, after all. Okay. System. Commence the evolution. Acknowledged. Evolution to Harbinger of the Eternal Ash SS initiating. C-387. Never aware of the strings. 3 days had passed since Nitro's city saw a change in leadership. In such a short span of time, the Ashfallen sect had made their overwhelming presence known. While cultists from the all-seeing eye flooded the streets, preaching stories of his past deeds and offering free pills and technique manuals to the masses, the Mudcloaks had been busy. The initial one-day deadline to replace the half-destroyed castle with a new symbol of power had been extended to 3. Even with Douglas working around the clock and with the help of the Mudcloaks, the project turned out to be bigger than any of them had expected. Formations of unknown purpose ran deep below the city. Not wanting to waste the opportunity to harvest so many spirit stones and to sat Guppy's endless hunger, the Mudcloaks had excavated hundreds of meters deep into the earth under the city. After an entire day and night of digging, all the spirit stones had been recovered, and construction could finally begin. Due to the sheer amount of materials needed, Ashlock actually flew Willow over to Nitro City and used the Bastion's artillery to blow up nearby mountains and then used telekinesis and portals to transport the pieces over to the Mudcloaks so they could reshape them into usable bricks. They needed a mountain's worth of materials because the castle and its surrounding land had been so vast that it could have been considered a city within a city. If this had been on Earth, Ashlock had no doubts that the populace would complain, saying a royal family did not need such a large space inside a capital city, and they would have been right. Driving from the front gate to the castle's door would have taken hours, and then you would have had to add the extra hour it would take to traverse the castle hallways to find a meeting room. Of course, that would have been the opinion of humans born and raised with Earth's standards. Meanwhile, despite resembling Earth in many ways with beautiful nature, blue skies, and the cities of humans, this world might as well be alien. After all, there were no cars in this world, and the Nitro's family certainly hadn't been a typical royal family. If Vincent was in a bad mood and released his soul pressure, he could crush millions of citizens to death. That was the type of power entire nations wielded, not a single man. Cultivators and mortals simply weren't comparable. The gap between them was that of heaven and earth, so Ashlock doubted the people of Nitro City had any negative opinions except jealously on the amount of space the Nitro's family had allocated themselves, as living too near to the comparative demigods could lead to a swift death. Not that the complaints of the mortals would have mattered if voiced, as the words of the Nitro's family had been absolute in this city, and that fact didn't change despite Ashlock taking over. If he made a castle any smaller or less impressive than Vincent's had been, then the populace would look down on their new rulers. While Ashlock didn't rule through fear like the Nitro's family, he still understood what it took to be respected. As such, Ashlock had helped with its construction while enjoying a steady inflow of divine energy as citizens watched in awe at such a construction project being completed so fast. I never thought Douglas and the Mudcloaks would become a source of divine energy for me, Ashlock mused during the evening of the third day as the building neared completion. In total, he had gained 2,700 sacrificial credits from defending himself from the heavens in view of everyone, the efforts of his cult members indoctrinating people, and this construction project. It would have been far more, but he didn't have many credits stored up to multiply in the first place, as he spent them to summon the SSS-grade Netherworld Wraith, who became Nixelia. Boss, the building's exterior is complete, but all the rooms need furniture, Douglas informed him as he flew above the castle. What do you think? Do you want any changes done while the Mudcloaks are still here? Let me see. Ashlock had overseen most of the building construction over the last few days when he wasn't distracted with concluding the tournament in his inner world, but it was still a good idea to do a once-over now that it was all finished. The entire structure took up the central third of the city, utterly dominating the comparatively tiny buildings occupied by the mortals that sprawled out around it until the giant walls of the city in the distance. They hadn't bothered to fill in the chasm they had made in the ground while digging out the formations, instead using it as an endless darkness from which a grand pillar of stone rose. Like a banner planted into the heart of Nitro City, the defiant pillar flattened out a few stories above ground level, proudly showing off the intricate carvings along its wreath of screaming people looking to the skies and gouging out their own eyes in madness. However, this pillar merely served as the foundation upon which the castle was built. While he called it a castle, it resembled a Gothic-style church, perfectly melded with a black metal tree that encased it like a butterfly's cocoon. Branches draped in chains fanned out in every direction, giving twisted chaos to the structure that reached for the heavens. It was a blend of human architecture being overtaken by nature despite the entire thing being constructed of cold stone and metal. Impossibly tall, its base was also broad enough to fill up the given space upon the pillar, creating a truly gargantuan structure that symbolized the Ashfallen sect's dominance over the city. Around the pinnacle of the castle was a halo of suspended red gemstones sculpted to look like eyes, which were suspiciously sized to fit in the empty eye holes of the statues at the pillar's wreath. It slowly rotated as if signifying the gradual passage of time. Ashlock then focused on the rest, as while the pillar and castle were the centerpieces, it wasn't all there was to the structure. Suspended bridges, bound by iron chains and etched with ancient runes, extended from the castle, linking it to innumerable smaller towers that rose from the crater-like spikes on the back of a slumbering eldritch god. These narrow pathways hung over the yawning pit below, reminding all who crossed them of the darkness lurking beneath their feet. Silver light flickered down the length of these bridges as, together with the surrounding towers, they formed an intricate defensive formation that protected the central structure from external attacks built from the recovered spirit stones. It was one of the most extensive and impressive formations Ashlock had ever seen. But considering what he had seen below Red Vine Peak, he wasn't surprised at how capable the Mudcloaks were at creating runic arrays. It's good, Ashlock said, though a bit evil looking. The statues tearing their own eyes out for them to endlessly float around the castle like a crown is a bit much, don't you think? Also, it doesn't look very inviting. Douglas stroked his chin. While I agree, this is already the toned down version. I had to say no to many suggestions the Mudcloaks had when I said we needed to make a building that encapsulated what the Ashfallen sect and all-seeing eye are all about. I'm sorry to say this, but I think we both know it's too late for you to change your evil god image. I know. Ashlock sighed. Maybe the bad weather is making it look worse than it would during a nice summer day. As the beast tide closed in, the storm had reached Nitro City, and without the blood-red dome protecting the city, freezing gales were accompanied by thunderous rain that drummed on the roofs and flooded the streets. Since the beast tide was coming from the north, it would hit all the cities in the Blood Lotus sect and the Tainted Cloud sect alongside the cities under Ashlock's control. Nobody was safe, as all these cities sat on the ley line and in the path of the beast tide on its way south toward the Celestial Empire. If you encounter this story on Amazon, note that it's taken without permission from the author. Report it. I have to admit the terrible weather arriving on the evening of you taking over the city and only growing worse since might spawn some rumors as it's only going to keep getting more intense as the beast tide closes in, right? Yeah, Ashlock agreed. Speaking of, do we have a plan yet on how to deal with it? I've been thinking a lot over the last few days. Douglas nodded expectantly, and I got nothing. Well, not nothing, but yeah, it's not looking good. Douglas frowned. I know I'm not the smartest in the sect, but I'm always open to lending an ear. Come on, boss, we can think of something. Ain't no way I'm letting Ashfallen fall to some dumb monsters and a bit of rain. Ashlock sighed as he looked over Nitro City, guilt tugging at his consciousness. The problem is I can't save them all. You don't have to. Nobody can. Douglas shrugged. What do you mean? Douglas pointed to the towering docking station in a distant part of the city that was suspiciously empty. Because we took over the city, all the airships left, and we have a policy of staying and standing against the beast tide. But you need to remember that there are millions upon millions of mortals across all the cities under the Blood Lotus sect. If I had to guess, over 90% would be left behind to die. The Nitro's family said there would only be a single trip to the new location because Vincent Nitros wanted to have as much time as possible to progress his cultivation before moving, so even with the increased number of airships, most would have been left to die. A silence hung between them as Ashlock contemplated his words. While the people of Nitro City wouldn't know it, being under him would give them a higher chance of survival. But he couldn't save them all. The beast tide would hit multiple cities at once, and he simply didn't have enough powerful people to defend every city. He also couldn't move everyone into his inner world as it was too small and couldn't produce enough food to feed millions of people that quickly. Just focus on what you can do, Douglas said after a while. I've found that when I do my best, things usually fall into place. Sometimes a problem can seem insurmountable at first, but if you break it down into small enough pieces and tackle them one at a time before you know it, it's as if the problem never existed. Huh, who knew you had such deep insights? Douglas's words reminded Ashlock of his days as a computer scientist when he was taught to break down problems. What's that supposed to mean? Douglas scowled and then laughed. I get it though. Many people look down on earth cultivators and those who work in construction, labeling them as hard-headed people with rocks for brains. But look at this. Douglas gestured to the castle. Can you not see and feel the creativity poured into this? It's a piece of art, one of the greatest in all the wilderness, and it was made by me, you, and a bunch of mudcloaks who can barely string a sentence together. That should sound impossible, but it was made possible because everyone had their job, and we worked together. Even if I had all the power in the world and was a god, I doubt I could complete this in that time frame on my own. At some point, the limit becomes our own minds and how much we can focus on at once. Ashlock felt like Douglas was speaking straight to his soul and oddly felt a weight lifted from his branches. He had been subconsciously putting the burden of the beast tide and saving millions of people on himself and forgot he was surrounded by many talented, capable people. Teamwork makes the dream work, Ashlock muttered a saying from his old world. Just because he was a godly tree with the potential to influence an area spanning the equivalent of a continent didn't mean he had to He just had to bunker down, survive the coming storm, and save as many people as possible. Then, as Douglas rightly said, everything else would fall into place. Thank you, Douglas. Ashlock said sincerely, I'll go figure out what I can do and get back to you. Also, love the castle. Douglas bowed slightly. A pleasure as always, boss. May your brainstorming be fruitful, for all our sakes. Grand Elder Valandor stepped out of the ether into a dark living room. Flashes of lightning from the raging storm outside briefly illuminated the room through the hefty drawn curtains. The furniture seemed new, yet a light layer of dust coated everything, like dirty snowfall. From here, he could see into a small kitchen. Grimy pots likely left out for days were piled up in the sink, and between where he stood and the kitchen tiles was a line of dried blood. Mortal, chi-less blood. Likely belonging to the people who once lived here. Following the line, Valandor set eyes on the wooden staircase leading up to the second floor of the two-story house. I can feel the disturbance in the ether, Valandor said as he stared at the top of the staircase. I know you are there, Vincent Nitros. A haunting chuckle filled the seemingly empty house. Good, very good, as expected of the disciplinary committee's head. The stairs creaked under an invisible weight, and Valandor felt the hair on the back of his neck rise and the sound of nails scraping on wood. Slowly, Vincent revealed himself, starting with his gnarled feet. The light bending around him faded with every step, revealing Vincent's terrifying figure. He looked vaguely human, yet the influence of all the bloodlines he had consumed over the years had warped him into something else. His limbs, including his fingers, were just slightly too long. His teeth were like needles, and his skin hung to his bones like a layer of paint. He looked utterly ghastly, and if the uncomfortable noise of him walking wasn't enough, the constant drum of his two spiritual hearts echoed through the room like a drumbeat. You're dying, Valandor said as Vincent struggled to descend the final step. The Ashfallen sect is going to butcher you and put your tyrannical rule to rest. You know that, yet dare to show yourself before me. Vincent smiled wildly, his lips splitting at the edges as he made his way to a chair in the room and sat. Valandor, you are part of the Ashfallen sect now, are you not? Yet your actions contradict your words. Here I am, one step in the afterlife. Yet you simply watch. A hint of delight flashed through his sunken eyes. Go on, Valandor. Try and kill me. It would rob Stella of her glory, but very well. Valandor stepped forward, his hand wreathed in burning ether. Vincent didn't move as he clasped his hand around the man's neck, pinning him to the chair, and tried to squeeze the life out of his old master. But he couldn't. His face twisted in confusion as he tried as hard as he could to command his hand to throttle the life out of this monster in human skin, yet it refused to comply. Vincent studied his face with amusement. What's wrong? I don't know. Why can't I kill you? Valandor's whole body trembled as he tensed every muscle he could, but it was fruitless. It was as if there was an impossible to breach barrier around Vincent, yet he could feel no chi. This wasn't Vincent's doing. He was simply incapable of killing his old master. Vincent sneered. I knew you were compromised ever since you told me those lies about Stella. She is alive, I've seen it. Why can't I kill this bastard? You thought you were free. Vincent leaned against his hand and whispered in his ear, making his body tingle. But you never were. After all, a puppet is never aware of their strings. No. Valandor stumbled back, collapsing on his back and looking at Vincent, staring down at him from the chair with terror gripping his soul. That's not possible. I was freed from you by consuming the world tree's sap. I was free. Really? Vincent leaned his head on his palm. Then why are you here? Did you inform the Ashfallen sect I was here in Darklight City? Why did you come alone and without help? Valandor trailed off. Why had he come here alone? Your master called, so you came. Vincent smirked, just like a good servant. Valandor tried to run, but his brain felt clouded. He couldn't focus. Now come here. Vincent beckoned with his finger. As you rightly pointed out, I'm dying. It's time I got a new body, and a perfect one to take over is right before me. No, please, Valandor begged. Vincent raised his hand, and ghostly red strings seemingly made of blood appeared between them. There were hundreds. What a disobedient puppet. Vincent pulled his hand back, and Valandor felt his whole body lurch forward along with the strings, and he was forcefully made to grovel at Vincent's feet. The monster reached down, caressing his ear as he went, and his surprisingly strong fingers wrapped around his throat. Master, I'm sorry. Please. Vincent ignored his pleading and effortlessly pulled him up despite his struggle and looked him dead in the eyes. You knew deep down this was always your fate, Valandor. You tried to foolishly escape it by sowing the seeds of war in the sect and raising rivals to me, but you always have been and always will be my spare body. You can't escape my control because you are me. Valandor closed his eyes and whispered, I know. It was something he had repressed deeply to the point of almost forgetting his dark past. But it was true. He was nothing but a spare. Good boy. Valandor dared not open his eyes but could hear Vincent unlocking his jaw. The monster's putrid breath assaulted his nose, followed by the horrifying pain of his needle-like teeth piercing his skin, followed by being eaten alive and unable to do anything about it. Stella, I could never escape my fate, but you and that spirit tree are different. You two are the defiers of fate. I could tell from a glance that you would both laugh in the face of the heavens. If there is anyone who will kill me after I become a monster, I hope it's one of you. Valandor let out one last soul-filled scream as he was devoured by himself. C-388. Sly Fox. Vincent Nitro stretched his new limbs with satisfying clicks and groaned in relief. He'd planned to craft a new body from scratch with the body parts he had harvested, but his current situation didn't afford him the time for fleshcraft. So he had to use something he had prepared long ago, Valandor. A cultivator with potential that he had taken under his wing and raised, all while deeply weaving his threads of control into his body. He had given Valandor everything. A position of great power, responsibility, and resources. He had been his most dependable pawn for years, a true backbone of the sect. But even Valandor likely knew his true purpose deep down as he began feeling a deep sense of detachment between his body and soul. After all, Vincent had never been after Valandor's soul, as achieving utter soul dominion over another was a power in the realm of the gods, and he had no use for ether affinity. No, what Vincent had always been after was a fresh body ready for use at any time. Vincent looked inside himself and was quite content with how the transition had gone. He had washed out Valandor's soul by burning it in his soul flames, leaving an empty husk behind that was strong enough to handle his soul without breaking. If Valandor had been in the nascent soul realm, this process would have been far more messy, if not outright impossible. It was one of the reasons Vincent had such a strict policy of keeping his sect members below the nascent soul realm, as the easiest way to escape his methods of control was by creating an infant soul and escaping to a new body. I will need to spend some time widening the spirit roots and altering the body to better utilize some of my bloodlines. Vincent paused his mutterings, surprised by his own voice. No matter how many times he swapped bodies, it always took a while to get used to hearing a different voice when he spoke. I heard Valandor giving me reports with this voice so many times, but it sounds so different inside my own head. Vincent had to admit he was slightly saddened at having to overtake Valandor. It was a true waste of such a good pawn, but the man had been compromised, so his fate had been sealed. Not to mention, this body won't last long. Vincent thought as he ran young fingers along the quickly healing cavity in his chest where he had bitten a chunk out to create a pathway for his soul to invade. This is a temporary solution. My soul is still damaged and nearing the end of its lifespan, so I need to get my infant soul into a new, specially made body soon. But for now, this will have to do. I can't afford to be weakened to the extent that swapping souls would entail right now, huh? The sound of cracking wood drew Vincent's attention. Looking over his shoulder, he saw his old body slumped in the chair with an unhinged jaw caked in blood and soulless eyes looking down at the floor. What the? Vincent noticed a branch growing from the corpse's chest, and the veins around it were quickly blackening through the corpse's pale skin like sprawling roots. Is this a result of that black blood I had been confining? He had left the black blood in his old body as it had drained on his blood chi to keep it suppressed, and he didn't see any use in holding onto it as if he let it out in any capacity. It seemed to attract the ire of the Ashfallen sect's leader. I've got to go, Vincent cursed as his two hearts pounded in his chest. He wrapped himself in a mixture of illusion and gravity chi, to make him invisible. The sound of his old body being twisted into a tree filled the room, and he quickly became unrecognizable. I could destroy this body, but the black blood seemed indestructible, and that would expose my presence here. I drained my old body of any trace of my soul, so they shouldn't be able to trace this back to me. Vincent turned and left the house that had belonged to a mortal family before he devoured them for a snack. He floated into the sky far above Darklight City and stared at Red Vine Peak in the distance. He could easily peer through the giant illusion array surrounding the peak due to his higher cultivation level and understanding of illusion chi. A demonic spirit tree nearing 200 meters high, whose canopy encompasses the entire mountain peak. It's unbelievable, but it appears to be in the nascent soul realm and is the focal point of the divine energy bathing the area. I knew the Celestial Empire's Chancellor was experimenting with World Tree sap. Was this tree a result of those experiments? If so, who is controlling it? Vincent had yet to find anyone who could be the leader of this Ashfallen sect. The World Tree was the strongest being in the Celestial Empire, but the Council of Human Cultivators controlled the Empire, not the tree. In fact, the World Tree was enslaved by the Council and harvested for its sap to progress their own cultivation. Spirit trees simply couldn't lead a sect. I heard that even at Monarch Realm, unlike monsters who gain a level of intelligence that rivals humans at the nascent soul realm, spirit trees can barely string sentences together and prefer to communicate through raw emotions. Meanwhile, this demonic spirit tree is in the middle of the nascent soul realm. Despite all signs suggesting it rules these lands, it's not possible. Vincent sniffed the air. The crestfallen scent was last there on the peak, but it's gone stale. They are hiding her somehow, or she has escaped through a portal to somewhere far outside my range. Either way, his eyes narrowed. Due to the illusion array and the very nature of the void, most wouldn't notice. But surrounding the peak in a dome was something sinister that promised an instant death, and Vincent had honed his sense of danger long enough to trust it. I must find a way to get close to the scent without raising suspicion. The problem is I don't know Valandor's standing within the Ashfallen sect. Not to mention, if the leader of Ashfallen uses whatever technique he used to discover that I had replaced the demoness with a blood clone, he might uncover that I'm not Valandor. Vincent raised his palm, and white flames appeared. With illusion and gravity chi, I can simulate ether chi to a point. But I can't traverse the ether, which will likely give me away. Vincent snuffed out his illusionary ether chi and looked back at the defensive void array surrounding the mountain peak. Wait, a void array. Only one family could have installed it and would know how to bypass or disable it. He turned and flew off toward Slemir. While even he was weary of the Voidmend family, he had to make use of the short timeframe where he was still at full power to gather some valuable puppets. Vincent arrived at the Voidmend residence confused. The place was empty. He knew the Voidmend family had been at war with the Skyrend family, but he had never expected this. Did they go into hiding? Vincent wondered as he floated through the quiet corridors with light bending around him. Eventually, he slowly opened the doors to the main room. Peeking his head through, he saw someone's foot poking off the end of a large sofa positioned before a tree. The person was softly humming and twitching their foot to their tune. Finally, a person is here, but why is a tree growing inside a room? Vincent floated closer and wrapped around. He looked at the woman up and down. She was dressed in a nightgown and reading a book with apparent amusement. He drew up a blank as to her name, though he had never been good at recognizing faces. Sniffing the air, he realized. Isn't this Morgan? She was at Nitro City a few days ago. That means she should be on the side of Ashfallen. Not the best candidate to try and puppet, but there's nobody else here. The Ashfallen sect leader didn't show much initiative to save her when I trapped an illusionary version of her in a bubble of gravity chi. Also, wasn't she accompanied by her daughter? Where is she? Morgan snapped the book she was reading closed and looked forward, not at Vincent. Do you need something? Vincent raised a brow. Morgan, you can feel my presence. He asked while using illusion chi to alter his voice. If you stumble upon this tale on Amazon, it's taken without the author's consent. Report it. Call it intuition, Morgan said. I know when I'm being watched. Who am I? How would I know? Morgan shrugged and laid back without a care in the world. Have you come to kill me? That depends on if you answer my questions, Vincent replied. What happened to the Voidmend family? Where did everyone go? Morgan's personality seemingly flipped as her eyes filled with hatred. They died. Slaughtered by the Ashfallen sect and turned into monstrosities that will serve their leader for all eternity. She gestured to the tree in the room, or turned into a tree, like my dear husband over there. Bless his soul, he deserved a better fate, but I couldn't save him despite my best efforts. Monstrosities. Vincent recalled the headless creature that had butchered his blood clones in his castle. He hadn't sensed the monster's approach, and it had effortlessly pierced his defenses. Both aspects of void chi. You know the Ashfallen sect's leader? Vincent asked. He needed to know the identity of a being capable of controlling even the void. Morgan shook her head. He is a mythical figure that never makes himself known. Some call him the voice, others the all-seeing eye. What about your daughter? He tried to remember the girl's name but drew a blank. My dearest Elaine. Can you believe the Ashfallen sect kidnapped her and turned her into a sex slave of that bastard Douglas? They made her sign a heavenly oath and brainwashed the poor girl. I recently brought her to Nitro City, hoping to free her from their control, but things went sideways. The Ashfallen sect won, and the Blood Lotus sect is falling apart. Morgan sat up, a look of sadness overtaking her. If only Vincent was still in control, this wouldn't have happened. Unfortunately, I think he might be dead. Phew, sorry. That was just a lot I had to get off my chest. Vincent's smile couldn't grow any wider. It was as if Morgan was saying everything he wanted to hear. He had been wondering how he would go about controlling a void cultivator, as they were well known to resist mind control techniques, but it seemed that wouldn't be necessary. She was practically at his feet, begging to be his puppet at this point. He could almost taste it. Do you hate the Ashfallen sect? Morgan snorted. Hate. Rage engulfed her as her nails dug into the sofa's cushions, tearing them. I despise the Ashfallen sect with all my being. They killed everyone in my family, enslaved my daughter, and forced me to sit here watching over an empty residence. Interesting. Do you know anything about the void array surrounding Red Vine Peak? Of course I do. Morgan smirked. I'm the one who built it. Vincent chuckled. This is music to my ears. You see, I have quite the bone to pick with the Ashfallen sect myself and have been looking for a way in. What would you say to a partnership? You are clearly a very strong and capable man, one able to elude my senses and sneak into this place I'm supposed to guard. Morgan sat up and bowed her head. I would do anything to get the help of one such as yourself. To save my daughter and reclaim what was once mine. Really? You would do anything? Vincent had heard from Valandor's reports that Morgan was quite an elusive figure in the Voidman family, which gave him the most difficulty. She seemed serious, and her hatred for the Ashfallen sect seemed genuine from all the signs. But since he couldn't control her directly due to Void Chi, there was only one way to be sure. He cancelled out the illusion on his foot. If you are really willing to go that far, prove it to me. Lick it. A cultivator, especially one of her standing, would never delve this low. To grovel at the foot of another and agree to partake in such a deplorable and demeaning act would mean they are willing to utterly discard their pride. That, or they are batshit insane. Vincent was wholly convinced that Morgan had been saying empty words, but to his surprise, she walked over to him and dropped to her knees. You're serious about this? He said with a hint of surprise that he couldn't hide. Are you willing to go to Red Vine Peak and gather some information for me? Morgan smiled and stared up at him while licking his foot. Sure, toying with arrogant beings is one of my favorite pastimes. Stella. Yes, Tree. Stella had just returned to Red Vine Peak and was in her alchemy lab. The Phantom Veil amulet hung from her neck, ensuring she could do as she liked. She just had to be careful not to shoot her chi out too far or leave any of her blood anywhere, as that may attract Vincent's attention. Sorry to bother you when you just got back, but can you go and check on an unauthorized demonic tree that has been reported in Darklight City? Stella trailed off as she looked at her pill experiment that was half done. Can you send anyone else? The others are currently preparing for a meeting where we will discuss countermeasures to the beast tide. I could maybe send Diana, but then you would have to attend the meeting in her place. Okay, I'm going. Stella ignored Ashlock's chuckling as she put the book she had been holding on the table and stepped into the ether. She didn't even know where this darn tree was, but anything was better than being dragged into a meeting, and she was sure an out-of-place tree would be easy to spot once she got there. This is concerning, though. Did someone get a hold of Ash's sap again? I thought Serena's fate at the tournament would have instilled enough wariness in the populace to not dare harvest his sap. Stella rushed through the ether and was about to return to reality somewhere in Darklight City when a distant presence caught her attention. A monster. She whipped her head in the direction of the presence but paused. Here in the ether. She had never heard or read about the ether containing other beings. If this is like the void, could it be the ether equivalent of a world walker? What should I do, Maple? Do I investigate or run? Stella whispered to the sleeping squirrel on her head but didn't receive an answer. Hey, listen to me, she smacked him lightly on the head, and Maple yawned. I know speaking for you wastes energy, so just point or something. Do you think it's fine? Maple sleepily opened an eye and looked in the direction of the presence. Whatever he saw didn't impress him as he snorted before rolling back over and falling asleep. I'll take that as your seal of approval. Stella rolled her eyes. Maple had never been very reliable except when it counted, but if he seemed unconcerned, it likely wasn't a being on the level of a world walker. I wonder what it could be. Stella walked closer as cautiously as she could toward it and narrowed her eyes. Is that a soul? There was a blazing ball like a miniature star about the size of a fist. It was clearly alive and aware as it flickered toward her. Though even she could tell it was dying and fading away. Why is it floating there? Hello, little soul, who are you? Stella asked as she extended her hand. She didn't feel any bloodlust or malice from the soul, but if it hurt her to the point of losing a finger, the spatial anchor would activate, and she would be dragged back through space to Quill's library. The soul nudged her hand, and she felt an intense tingle. This soul isn't little at all. Stella's eyes widened. It's at least at the peak of the star core realm. Far stronger than me. Is someone else out there with ether affinity as strong as Valandor? Stella mused, and that got a reaction out of the soul. It blazed with power as if begging for her attention. You know Valandor. It pulsed enthusiastically. Stella tapped her chin as a terrible realization set in. Are you Valandor? The soul did the universally known equivalent of an enthusiastic yes. What happened to you? Stella asked in a panic but then remembered the soul couldn't speak. Did someone kill you? Yeah, who? Darn it, why can't you speak? No, wait, don't die on me. Stella desperately cradled the soul and tried to feed it chi to no avail as the soul seemed to reject her offering. Stella's mind raced as she thought about who could have done it. Valandor was strong, a grand elder of the Blood Lotus sect, and was known as the White Reaper as he worked under Vincent Nitros. He had a lot of enemies, and many people resented him. Could it have been one of the other noble families making use of the chaos to get revenge on you? No, that shouldn't be possible. You were too strong. Stella's eyes widened. Was it Vincent? Did he kill you? The soul did one final pathetic flicker to say yes as it almost faded into the beyond. That bastard. Stella gritted her teeth. I'll kill him one day. I swear to the heavens I'll rip his head off. She cupped her hands around Valandor's soul. Don't go. Stay here to watch me get revenge. For the both of us. An intense tingle burned into her fingers, but she didn't dare let go. Please stay. She whispered through the pain. I still have a lot to learn from you. The books are too hard to understand. Her brain and consciousness suddenly flared with pain, and her eyes glowed white as what could only be described as enlightenment flooded her mind. She floated there in agony for a long while, but she didn't dare reject the pain. She embraced it and desperately tried to comprehend everything being thrown at her. If not for her bloodline, her consciousness may have fallen apart. But she managed to hold on until the end, and the result of what she had gained shocked her. The information Valandor provided her had perfectly merged with her own and what her ancestors could bestow into the very peak of enlightenment. This is. She couldn't believe it. Ether Chi Law. I want to practice. No. She shook her head. Now wasn't the time to grasp her new capabilities. She needed to inform Ash of her findings straight away. Vincent had killed Valandor and was likely here in Darklight City. Stella stepped out of the ether into a house. A howling wind played with her hair, and rain fell on her face. She glanced up, the ceiling having been pierced by a tree. While big, it felt soulless to her. There was no hint of chi coming from it. Where did this tree get such rich nutrients to grow so quickly from? Stella was puzzled until she wondered why Valandor's soul was floating in the ether beside this tree. Was it made from Valandor's body? But why? Wasn't Vincent looking for a new body? Stella rushed through the ether back to Red Vine Peak, and as she stepped out, she was surprised to see someone who didn't visit often. Morrigan. Oh, hello. Morrigan smiled at her. Her mouth didn't move, yet she somehow whispered into her ear with a hint of amusement. Vincent is listening. C389. Desolation. Morrigan was having fun for the first time in a long time. It wasn't every day that she got to wrap multiple higher stage cultivation beings around her finger. She loved nothing more than seeing these arrogant children who called themselves cultivators reduced to despair, and there was nobody she wanted to see despair more in this lifetime than Vincent Nitros. So it was quite a surprise when a soul pressure she recognized to belong to Vincent showed up in her room. As the origin of the void, a being that was the manifestation of an affinity and had lived countless lives since the heavens created reality. Her attachment to anything was fleeting at best, including her pride. Her void affinity is significantly suppressed in reality. Because of this, she had to listen to Vincent's orders despite the strength of her affinity. The gap between them was simply too huge, and she really hated dying and having to start over again as a baby. Void chi was nearly impossible to cultivate without the assistance of arrays, so childhood was always rough. Yet Vincent had come to her room with an adorable plan to turn her into one of his puppets. All she had to do to flip the script on him was lick his foot. She had almost burst out laughing at how easy the request had been. As a being who had been there since the birth of creation, she had done and seen everything there was to be experienced. She hadn't lied when she said she was willing to do anything. Besides, she had coated her tongue in void chi, so she hadn't felt a thing. With Vincent convinced of her soul-burning hatred for the Ashfallen sect, Morgan had flown over here with Vincent in tow and bumped into Stella, stepping out of the ether. Morgan had to admit she was impressed with Stella's growth as a cultivator. The girl managed to remain stone-faced at her words regarding the fact that Vincent was listening. What do you mean he is listening? Ashlock's voice echoed through the void, reaching her and Stella's ears. He came to Sleemir in search of a puppet, and I offered myself up, Morgan replied, ensuring both could hear as she spoke with void chi to hide her words from Vincent's prying ears. He's a cautious man, though, so he's invisible and floating outside the defensive void array you have set up. Vincent is here. Ashlock sounded a little panicked. Are you under his mind control? Of course not. Morgan felt like rolling her eyes. How did you convince him to trust you? Oh, that was easy. Morgan paused. I got on my knees and sucked his toes. There was a drawn-out silence, and Morgan enjoyed how Stella's stone-faced facade cracked as she silently stared her down. While she wanted to see Vincent despair, it was also fun to mess with the others. Sucked his toes. Why? Is Vincent into that sort of thing or something? No idea. I said he could request anything to prove my loyalty to him, and that was his request. I'm surprised that's all it took. Ashlock seemed understandably baffled. Well, I also gave a compelling speech that I put my heart and soul into about how much I despised the Ashfallen sect. Huh, what did we do to you? Killed my family, turned my husband into a tree, kidnapped my daughter. Okay, I see your point. Turned Elaine into a sex slave for Douglas, forced me to keep watch over an empty residence. Alright, now you're just making up bullshit. Of course, it was all bullshit from the start. I even told him I was the one who made this defensive void array. What I said doesn't matter. What matters is that I have convinced him I'm on his side. The problem is, he's one cautious bastard. I need to prove myself more before he will trust me to the point I can lead him to his death. How can I even trust you at this point? Ashlock sighed deeply. But fine, what do you need us to do? Morgan was about to reply when a distorted voice tickled her ear. What's the hold up? Who is that mortal in front of you? It was Vincent's adorable attempts to obscure himself, and it seemed he didn't recognize Stella. She's a mortal in service to the all-seeing eye. Nobody for you to be concerned about, but she is allowed to carry out the all-seeing eye's will onto the people of the Ashfallen sect. Morgan effortlessly lied to Vincent through the void before subtly informing Stella, Vincent doesn't recognize you. I told him you're a mortal who is able to carry out the all-seeing eye's will. Now, I'm supposed to be watching over the residence, yet I came here unannounced. What would be a fitting punishment for a disobedient servant like me? It can be anything, I don't mind. In a twisted way, Morgan was deeply curious about what Stella would do. Stella stopped staring at her. A look of annoyance flashed across her face. Morgan Voidmond, you're supposed to be guarding the Sleemir residence. Why are you here? It's not the best acting, but it will do. Morgan stepped forward. I'm concerned about the safety of Sleemir and Red Vine Peak. Is this void array really the only thing that can stop Vincent Nitros should he appear? Stella snorted arrogantly. So what if it is? With this void array, we have no need to fear someone like Vincent. If it was to be disabled. Stella waved her off. That would never happen, right? You're the one who made it in the first place. Right. Morgan awkwardly scratched the back of her neck. Also, you wouldn't happen to know where Stella is. I had something to tell her. The all-seeing eye is protecting her for now, though she has been insisting on making an appearance in. She paused for a moment, seemingly trying to remember something. Ah yes, Tartarus. Stella crestfallen insisted on testing the new training realm before it opened to the rest of the cult. I see. Morgan bowed deeply. This story has been stolen from Royal Road. If you read it on Amazon, please report it. Say, Morgan, have you seen Valandor recently? Stella asked cryptically. No. Stella has meant to meet with him as she has something very important to give him. Right. Morgan nodded, unsure what Stella was getting at. Thank you for answering my questions, I'll return now. Hold it right there, Stella said, and Morgan could barely contain her smile. Just what was the little murder princess going to think up? Put out your arm. Morgan turned to face her punisher and complied. Stella clicked her finger, and Ashlock, looming behind her, charged up with spatial chi. A second later, reality tore apart, and she felt a shoot of pain followed by a thud. Her arm, cleanly cut off by a spatial blade, lay at her feet. Get out of here, Voidman trash, and don't you dare try to heal that arm. Every time you look at the bloodied stump, remember the greatness of Ashfallen and your place in this sect. Stella sneered and left. Morgan stood there, stunned for a moment. Vincent returned to Sleemir with an enraged Morgan. I'll kill them. I'll fucking kill those bastards, she screamed as she paced the room. The sofa had long been obliterated by a kick, pieces of it scattered across the mostly empty room. Void chi aggressively flickered across her shoulders as she clutched her stump with her left hand. To think a mortal would be so arrogant as to smite my arm off. Heavens, if not for them having my dear Elaine captive, I would kill them myself. Vincent was now entirely convinced that Morgan was on his side. While she might not be considered a reliable puppet, there was one thing for sure. They shared a common enemy, and that was good enough for him. Morgan, together we can put an end to them. Especially that mortal. While the girl had looked vaguely familiar, she had no scent he recognized, so she might as well be another mortal in a sea of faces. All useless and beneath him, not worth the precious space in his mind. With his soul on the edge of collapse and at the end of its lifespan, he was effectively going senile. Forget the mortal, Morgan hissed, she is just a pawn of the all-seeing eye. A mere mouthpiece. The whole sect is like that, every last one of them. You promised to help me eradicate them. Vincent had no plans for such a thing. He didn't care about the Ashfallen sect at all. The Crestfallen bloodline was his focus. Sure, he lied through his teeth, if we work together, anything is possible. Morgan collapsed to the floor against a pillar, a look of despair on her face. But how can we do it? You heard them. The Void Array is strong enough to defeat Vincent Nitros, one of the most powerful cultivators in the wilderness. While I could disable it, there's a chance they catch me before I succeed. The Void Array is a concern, but I have a better idea. Vincent cancelled out his illusions and revealed himself to Morgan. Valandor. Morgan's eyes widened. Why are you naked? Have some decency. Vincent snorted, rich coming from a woman with as little pride as you. Besides, clothes are a nuisance. They mess with my invisibility and get torn up when I use my blood affinity. Blood affinity. Morgan seemed confused. Ah. Vincent chuckled. Apologize for the confusion. It's me, Vincent Nitros. I overtook Valandor's body. A look of realization seemed to hit Morgan. Vincent Nitros. You're alive. She threw herself at his feet. Oh, thank the heavens, there is still hope. With someone of your caliber helping me, we can defeat the Ashfallen sect and recover the Blood Lotus sect to its former glory. Vincent sneered. That's right. What a dumb bitch. I can see right through her. She thinks by clinging to me, she will get a great position in the sect once I retake everything that was once mine. But that will only happen if she gives her everything to me. Body and soul. What was your profound plan? Morgan asked with expectant eyes. Ahem. Vincent coughed into his hand. Remember when that mortal asked if you had seen Valandor recently? Morgan scowled at the mention of the mortal who had commanded for her arm to be blown off by the spirit tree before slowly nodding. Yes, I remember. She said that Stella had something to give Valandor. Exactly. Vincent summoned some illusionary ether flames. With this body and my illusion chi, I can pass as Valandor and get close to Stella Crestfallen. I just need to avoid the Ashfallen sect's leader, as he will see through my disguise. Which is why I think this place the mortal mentioned, what was it called? Tartarus. Yeah, that's the one. What can you tell me about it? It's a rift that the Ashfallen sect plans to turn into a training realm. Vincent raised a brow. A permanent rift. Morgan nodded. Vincent whistled. Those are rare. No wonder the Ashfallen sect plans to stay and face the beast tide. How much control do they have over it? I'm not entirely sure. Enough to seal off the entrance should I enter. Morgan shook her head. No. Definitely not. Nobody can do that except the gods. That's good enough then. Vincent grinned, proud of his plan. From the mortal's words, it seemed Valandor had a decent standing in the sect. At least enough that he was allowed to speak directly with Stella, which is all he needed. Defeating the Ashfallen sect. Freeing Morgan's daughter. What an utter waste of chi. He only had eyes for the Crestfallen bloodline. Though I am interested in this permanent rift. Should the beast tide wipe them out, I'll be sure to return to this land and claim it for myself. Vincent found a spot on the floor that wasn't covered in pieces of the sofa and sat down on the cold stone. Assuming a cross-legged position, he closed his eyes. I will be busy fixing this body and cultivating for now. Inform me if you hear anything about Stella being in Tartarus. Don't you worry. Morgan said as she walked through the room toward the door, clutching her stump. You will be the first to know. Ashlock withdrew his attention from Slemir and was somewhat concerned. Either Morgan was the greatest actor of all time, or cutting off her arm had genuinely enraged her. Either way, it seems we have tricked Vincent, Ashlock said to Stella back on Red Vine Peak, and had to admit he was quite surprised, as he had planned to play a significant role in scheming against Vincent, yet it had been handled by Stella and Morgan, of all people. To think he overtook Valandor's body, how did you know that? 2 reasons, Stella held up 2 fingers while she stood in the meeting room with everyone else. Ashlock tried his best to refrain from commenting on the fact that sending her to investigate the tree had resulted in her attending the meeting anyway. It was almost as if fate had it out for her. The tree you sent me to investigate. It was soulless yet had grown so big in what I assumed was a short amount of time, considering it had only just been reported. For that to occur, it had to have grown from a powerful cultivator or monster's body that was somehow missing its soul. Stella lowered one of her fingers. While that had been a big clue, I wouldn't have figured it out if not for running into Valandor's soul in the ether. What was it doing there? Diana asked. I think he either escaped or was forced there by Vincent. I sadly don't know the truth, as he could not speak to me, just answer yes or no questions. One of which confirmed he had been killed by Vincent. Either way, we know Vincent had no reason to go after Valandor like that unless he needed something. Such as switching bodies. How he did it, I still have no idea. So where is Valandor's soul now? Ashlock asked. That man had been quite strong and had ether affinity. He would make a good bastion and cultivation area for Stella. Stella patted her chest. I absorbed his soul, so he's a part of me now. Don't worry, he's not dead. Just in a state too weak to do anything. That's a relief, Ashlock sighed. He also imparted his knowledge on me. Stella conjured an ether chi soul flame, and something about it felt different. It was unsettling how perfect it was, as if Stella was not simply borrowing the power of the ether but was the ether herself. Is that what I think it is? Stella grinned. Yep, it's ether chi law, and I have concluded something through this newfound understanding. What have you concluded? Ashlock was intrigued. While I could probably make a pseudo-ether chi origin stone now if I had the materials, she snuffed out the soul flame. I won't. Why not? Ashlock didn't understand. Stella knew how valuable that stone would be for him. It would upgrade his affinity from spatial to the higher tier ether affinity. That had been their whole plan after she had returned from the mystic realm. Stella grinned. Because ether chi doesn't suit you, but I think I know which one will. There are 2 sides to every coin, and the same can be said about affinities. While ether chi is about seamless traversal through reality, which suits me. You want to use your affinity for something else, right? Yeah, Ashlock agreed. As his system rarely gave him direct attack skills, it was through his affinity and learned techniques that he had combat capabilities. Stella nodded. That's why I think desolation affinity that focuses on the raw destruction of reality would suit you better. C390. Bringer of Ruin. Stella waited in anticipation that Ashlock would agree to her idea. Ether affinity didn't suit him as it encompassed fluid movement through reality, and he was, well, a tree. Sure, he had bastions and liked to move the sect members around. But at the end of the day, he wasn't going to use it to its full potential. This realization saddened Stella until she discovered another possibility. In Valandor's understanding, she had been shown a side to the spatial affinity she had never seen before. Its raw potential for untold destruction and ruin. While spatial chi held reality together, if someone were to use their control over it nefariously, they could wield entropy. Desolation affinity. Ashlock said. I have never heard of such an affinity before. Does it really exist? Stella nodded enthusiastically. Not only does it exist, it's absolutely perfect for you. She was dead set on trying to sell the idea of this affinity to him as she believed it was worth it despite the ruin it would bring to the 9 realms. How did you learn about it? Ashlock asked. Stella coughed into her hand before beginning a short lecture. From my various enlightenments and taking on the teachings from others, I have concluded that affinities can be viewed as an upside-down tree. She wreathed her finger in ether chi and drew a diagram in the air to illustrate her points, as cultivators tended to tune out of discussions if there weren't diagrams to look at. The trunk represents the fundamental affinities upon which reality is built. Things like fire, water, earth. In our reality, these are the affinities with the widest range of applications and are also easy to cultivate as their chi is common. You can build upon these affinities by learning Taos, which are basically the rules that make up reality. Her eyes flickered to the red claws present in the room. For example, The Redclaws could learn Lava Dao and control lava. Right. Grand Elder Redclaw hummed in agreement. Yes, but you don't have lava chi. Stella finished his sentence. Exactly. He nodded. While I can control lava if it's there, I can't manifest it out of my fire chi like I could a firestorm, for example. Stella pointed to a branch. If the trunk of this tree represents fire chi, one of the most fundamental but basic affinities, this branch here is lava chi. If someone cultivated lava affinity, could they still use fire chi? Elaine was the one to answer. Usually yes. There are exceptions, but most cultivators that cultivate higher tier affinities can use lower tier ones. Interesting. So why don't they? Stella countered as she shifted her focus to the girl. In a way, she was getting slightly off topic, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she was the one with more information about the world than those around her, and she was eager to share her findings with them. Partly because she felt smart doing so, but also because she wanted to give back to those who had taught her. Elaine pushed up her glasses while looking confused. What do you mean? Let's take an ice cultivator, for example. Do you ever see them attacking with water balls? Or waves of water? No, you don't. Grand Elder Redclaw mused as he leaned back in his chair. Those guys always come in with ice golems and snowstorms. What about you, Diana? Stella turned to her friend sitting nearby. Since obtaining the demonic mist affinity, how often do you use water techniques? Rarely, Diana admitted. And why is that? Diana crossed her arms, thinking, they are just worse. She said after a while, they also feel strange and inefficient when I tried using them recently. I mean, my soul is optimized to process and wield demonic mist chi. I can convert it into water chi and use my old water chi techniques, but I don't find many situations where that would be necessary. What is your point, though? Hold on, I'm getting to that. Stella pointed to the diagram. Back to fire. This branch represents lava chi. We all agree that someone can have lava chi affinity and still use fire chi techniques. Meanwhile, someone with fire chi can use lava techniques so long as they comprehend the Tao and there is lava chi that happens to be nearby to manipulate. Right. Everyone nodded. Stella gestured to the other branches coming off this branch. We can all agree that lava chi is a high tier affinity, but we can get even higher tier ones like volcanic affinity. The point is that the branches keep sprawling out with new and more specific possibilities. The further you go from the fundamental affinities, the more specialized the type of affinity the cultivator can wield. Now, the point I was trying to make, she paused to take a breath, is that a special few affinities sit outside this model, and spatial is one such example. Isn't spatial a higher tier affinity? Ashlock asked. That's what I also believed, and let's assume it is. That means it would be one of these branches. If so, can you use fire, earth, or water chi? No. Ashlock trailed off. I can use those Daos, but not those chi types. Wouldn't that make spatial one of the fundamental affinities? Stella suggested. I suppose so. It must be a low tier affinity if I cannot use any other affinity. Stella pointed to random branches. Can any of these higher tier affinities, such as lava, ice, storm, and more, use spatial chi? Ash thought for a while before concluding. I doubt it. Stella nodded. Right, which is why I consider it a special case to the rule. Because of that, it cannot be included in this diagram. It sits beyond it alongside some other affinity types that govern reality on a higher level than simple elements. Hence, we consider it a higher tier affinity. I see. This was quite interesting. Ashlock said, but what does it have to do with desolation affinity? Stella smiled as she was given an opportunity to show off her new knowledge. By obtaining Ether Chi Law, I gained a profound understanding of Ether Chi and all that it encompasses, including spatial Chi, the lower tier affinity. From this, I learned that spatial Chi is the glue that holds this tree of reality together. Think of it as the bark, and when you open a portal, it's tearing a temporary hole through reality's bark. Meanwhile, Ether Chi is like a tree's sap. Instead of punching a hole through the bark to traverse reality, I can flow effortlessly with the sap. And desolation. Where would it come in? Like this, Stella manipulated the floating Ether Chi tree to show it withering away. You manipulate reality not by tearing holes through it or going along with its flow. No, you erode anything in your way to create the change you desire. Imagine how easy it would be to cross a vast wasteland compared to a dense forest. That is the idea of desolation, to bring ruin to reality. There was a drawn-out silence in the room, but Stella could feel that Ash was thinking it over deeply. Unauthorized use of content. If you find this story on Amazon, report the violation. He's never getting over the evil god image, is he? Douglas muttered under his breath. Stella shrugged. I think he suits being an evil god. Stella, you know how powerful Ashlock is and how much land his presence dominates. Grand Elder Redclaw replied with a serious expression. This desolation affinity you are suggesting will devastate the realm even after battles are over. He will leave barren wastelands of decay and ruin in his wake. So what? Stella tilted her head. All this world has tried to do is kill us. If Vincent gets his hands on me, he will slit my neck and drink my blood. If any of you had found Ash back when he was a sapling, you would have forced him to produce fruits to sell or turn them into pills. Not to mention, this realm is overrun with beasts who slaughter anyone in their way. My point is, why should we care? The silence returned. Look, Stella pulled out a chair and took a seat. All eyes were on her. I get it, I really do. But I know Ash better than any of you, and I can say he will wield this power responsibly as any man-eating evil god tree could. Maybe just look at it as a necessary evil. Yes, Ash will bring destruction, but in the process, he will rid this realm of the beast tide and create a better life for mortals and cultivators alike. Nobody here doubts Ashlock, Stella, Diana reassured her. But you know, we all kinda live and exist in this reality that the heavens have built. So, to suggest someone acquire the power to tear it down and bring it to ruin. It's like being on a boat in an ocean and letting someone poke holes in it. Even if they promise in the end the water will help wash out the termites gnawing at the hull, and they will plug up the holes, it's hard not to feel apprehensive about it. Stella nodded along in agreement. She could see and understand their apprehension, yet in the back of her mind, she struggled to really care. My world is here with Tree, on Red Vine Peak, surrounded by those I care about. So long as this piece of paradise exists, I don't care if we are surrounded by ruin. Ultimately, the decision would be up to one tree, and everyone knew it. What do you think, Ash? Stella asked the ceiling. Stella always felt it, but it seemed some others also noticed the return of his focus on the room. I'm certainly intrigued. Though how would I learn it? Do you have an origin stone or something? Stella shook her head. I can assist you, but you would have to learn it yourself. However, I think it won't be too hard as you already have comprehension of many DAOs and an inner world that you lord over where you can try create desolation and study it. Do you know any techniques I would be capable of should I learn desolation affinity? Ash asked. Stella's spatial ring flashed with silver light, and multiple blank notebooks and ink-dipped pens appeared floating in the air. With absolute control over the ether and a profound understanding of the underlying spatial chi, manipulation on this scale was easy. Coming right up. Just give me a moment to transcribe what my ancestors documented. Stella crossed her legs and closed her eyes. An overwhelming sense of calmness and control washed through her as she tapped into her bloodline, and to her surprise, she didn't have to offer anything up or put on a show. Her ancestors seemed more than keen to pass down their knowledge of desolation affinity despite the fact she was planning to hand it over to somebody else. The celestial library carved inside an endless golden tree appeared overhead, and books flew off the shelves and spiraled toward her. They opened up, their pages flicking faster than the eye could see, yet the vast amount of information was transplanted straight into her mind, making it burn. In the silence of the room, all that was heard was the scratching of paper as Stella desperately transcribed the information to the once blank notebooks to try and relieve the pressure on her mind. She didn't want this information. It was for Ash, and it seemed her ancestors knew this as they forced an obscene amount of information into her head, so much so that there was no chance for her to digest and comprehend it. Ashlock felt warmth seeing the lengths his daughter was willing to go to teach him a new affinity. She had been distraught when she returned from the mystic realm without the ether origin stone to gift him, and he had caught her neck deep in long nights of research ever since. So he had been confused when she announced that despite achieving ether chi law, she had no plans on teaching it to him, but now he understood. What he needed was not an affinity that helped him be harmonious with reality, he needed one that let him lord over its destruction to protect the things he loved. There were undoubtedly more spatial techniques out there that he had yet to learn, but he was certainly reaching the limits of what was possible with the affinity. Facing the incoming beast tide and feeling helpless had proved as much to him. Portals and tears in reality did little to a seemingly never-ending storm. As Stella had so well pointed out during her lecture, spatial chi punched temporary holes in reality that were always filled back in. So, facing a storm, whose greatest advantage was moving to fill in space and cover the advance of the beast tide, was a direct counter to him. Desolation sounded just like what he needed. But unlike ether affinity that Stella could likely teach him in a day if she could make a pseudo-origin stone, desolation affinity seemed more up to him to learn. Looks like Stella has taken a giant step ahead of me once again. Diana sighed as she rested her head on her palm and slumped over the table. She watched Stella's impressive performance alongside everyone else. Multiple books were spread open with two pens writing on both sides of the page as fast as possible, practically burning trails into the paper. Grand Elder Redclaw snorted. How do you think I feel? I've participated in more wars than years she has been alive, yet she has surpassed me in cultivation and understanding of the Tao. She surpassed you. Diana frowned. I thought you were on the cusp of reaching nascent soul realm. I am and have begun creating my infant soul, he replied simply, yet I don't think I would last 1 second in a fight against Stella. Diana nodded slowly. I know what you mean. Having absolute authority over an affinity makes it seem like having another limb rather than a power you borrowed from the heavens. Wow. This is ridiculous. There's no way she could do this before learning Ether Chi Law. And this is just writing on some notebooks, Grand Elder Redclaw pointed out. Imagine fighting against this in battle. I wouldn't have a chance to finish casting a technique before she steps out of the ether behind me and rams a dagger through my heart. Diana sighed in apparent frustration. What are you two getting so hung up over? Sebastian Silverspire smiled. I agree Stella is a genius, but nobody makes me feel as inferior as my young master Riker. That's true. Diana soured and slothfully fell back against her chair. He's what, 5? Yet already in the Star Core realm. Sebastian simply nodded, and everyone fell silent, seemingly thinking over their inferior talent. Done. Stella suddenly shouted, jolting them out of their gloomy thoughts. The books fell to the table, and the pens vanished into her spatial ring. Heavens, that was fucking painful, she cursed while massaging her temples. My brain feels like it's going to melt out my ears as a soup. Diana raised her hand and spewed mist at her, and as it faded away, it revealed a grumpy-looking Stella with damp hair clinging to her face. Not funny, she frowned. Did it cool you down though? Diana countered. Of course not. Stella rolled her eyes. Your mist isn't even cold. It's closer to boiling hot. Bah. Be more appreciative. Diana waved her off. Ever since you gained Ether Chi Law, you've gotten a big head. Stella huffed. You're just jealous, aren't you? No comment. Ashlock ignored their squabbling and picked up one of the books. Flicking to a random page, he found a technique titled Desolation Field. The description was long. He speed-read the ancient runes Stella had scribbled down with impressively good handwriting and got the gist of the technique's capabilities. He looked at a few more to satisfy his curiosity and concluded that this was exactly what he needed. Desolation Affinity was basically spatial chi with the added flavor of bringing ruin to everything his presence touched. In his domain, weapons would rust, plants would wither, monsters would feel the life sucked from them, and reality would crumble. It wasn't flashy or pretty like Stella's ether flames. But it seemed extremely powerful, especially for him, as it would thrive off his extensive reach and chi pool. System, do you think I can upgrade my affinity to Desolation? It's possible because Desolation Affinity builds upon spatial affinity that you already have a deep understanding of. The main thing that will hold you back is a profound understanding of the Taos to which you wish to bring desolation. You can't just break apart something you don't understand. Ashlock thought over the list of Taos he currently comprehended. Fire, water, earth, wind, metal, shadow and soul. While he didn't have every one, due to the Taos he had to gather to form his inner world, he had all the fundamental ones. These should be enough to deal with the encroaching storm of the beast tide, Ashlock mused. System, what will it take to learn Desolation Affinity? I will have to absorb the knowledge of those books through Quill, and you will have to let half of your inner world succumb to ruin so we can begin slowly converting your spatial chi reserves to Desolation chi. Once your 9th soul moon reflects the altering of your inner world and embraces desolation, you will have gained it permanently. Ashlock returned his focus to the room. Stella, his daughter, who was on the floor wrestling with Diana and easily winning, looked up at the ceiling. Yes, Tree. Bring the books to Quill's library. I'm going to take on Desolation Affinity. Woo. She punched the air and vanished in a flash of white flames. Diana sat up and frowned. This isn't fair. Grand Elder Redclaw patted her on the shoulder. Life is like that sometimes. Just ambush her or something next time.